Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melenda, welcoming you back to a Tuesday stream where today we are going to be covering the newly released Fabula Ultima Atlas Natural Fantasy. So obviously, if you're a Fabula Ultima fanboy or fangirl or fan person, then you have probably seen the playtest of these documents that have been kind of floating around. And Emmanuel, being the clever trickster that they are, decided to drop it's kind of a surprise release, and the PDF is available. And hopefully the Atlas itself in physical print will be available in at Gen Con. I will say, before we get into this, for a small press publisher, as they are, I really have to tip my hat to the folks over at Need Games and Manuel Galetto, because they came out with Fabula Ultima, and in Fabula Ultima, they describe three primary forms or settings that a typical JRPG is going to be set in: your high fantasy game, your techno fantasy game, and your natural fantasy game. They describe these as the three themes, just 2-page spreads, I think, maybe 4-page spreads. And then, like clockwork, every year since then, we have gotten an atlas. We've got the high fantasy. Last year, we got techno fantasy. And this year, we get natural fantasy. And of course, the bestiary is in the works. So today, we're going to cover natural fantasy. It just came out. Now, I'm familiar with some of the concepts in it because, number one, I've seen the playtest documents, and number two, we are starting or trying to start a Fabula Ultima campaign. Unfortunately, life keeps throwing me curveballs, unfortunately. But we do have characters created, and two of our characters, I think, are members of or classes rather from natural fantasy, and these were from the playtest, so it'll be interesting to see if they change. Also, we're going to try something here. I don't know if it's going to work. It's new to this overlay extension I'm using, so hopefully it'll work. If it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. We'll fix it, and we'll try again. So you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, type !/ join to enter the giveaway. Well, what is the giveaway? Well, the giveaway is a physical copy of Fabula Ultima JRPG Atlas Techno Fantasy. However, this one is signed by Emmanuel from Gen Con 2024. So you are going to be getting a signed copy of the Atlas High Fantasy, Atlas Techno Fantasy, which of course came out last year. And if you win, make sure I stick around, and I'll give you an email address, and you can send me your contact information. If you're not a patron, if you're a patron, obviously you can just ping me on the server. So get your entry in. I'll bring this up before I do the drawing. So this is an opportunity for folks to win one. I bought a bunch of these back at Gen Con, and I've been looking for an opportunity to give them away. And, I kind of forgot to do it when we did the Techno Fantasy stream. Oops. And so now here we are. We're going to give this away, and hopefully somebody who wants a copy gets a copy. And of course, it also includes a PDF download thing as well. So get your join in, get your, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so let's not waste too much time. We got a lot to cover, and I want to cover it. I've even got express permission, if you want to call it that, from the author, from Emmanuel, to cover some of the GM stuff. They thought I was doing the book a disservice by not including those things last time, so we're gonna go do that. So let's bring up our PDF. Here we go. Fabula Ultima TT JRPG Atlas Natural Fantasy. Now, for starters, one thing I want to quickly touch on here, which I think is important, is something that has actually recently kind of come up in some of our conversations. Let me fix this overlay here a little bit, which has come up in some of our conversations on the Discord, which is that, like, is this anime style art? And a lot of people say, like, they're like, well, some people have said, well, I don't like Fabula Ultima because I don't like the style of anime art. And my take on this is, and they're like, well, Derek likes this, and Derek doesn't like anime art. And that is 100% true. So then what exactly what are we doing here, right? Well, the fact of the matter is there is something inherent to the JRPG art style that I find very, very, very soothing. And there's something different about it, just a little different about it, that for some odd reason really makes all the difference. So for me, this is cool stuff. All right, so we've got our art, and of course, most of the atlases have included a number of bonus classes, new classes, I should say. Now, they're called classes, but if you've played Final Fantasy for any amount of time, you know that these are really jobs. And of course, I'm not going to be going into the detail about Fabula Ultima as much with this stream. But if you do have questions, if this is your first time, ask them in chat. Use the word question, and it'll highlight it. Maybe, if you want to drop a super chat or a tip, I'll be sure to get to it. Additionally, if we get our super chat goal of $50, we'll do our next campaign setting stream. We just did Planescape a week or two ago. And if we get $100 in tips, I'm gonna try to get Rooster Ima on. That's the author of Fabula Ultima. So anyways, we always get a couple new classes, and Natural Fantasy is no exception. So we do have a couple of the 4 new classes that will be in this book. Okay, let me actually. Oops, I forgot to put my new little extension here. There you go. All right. The outside world is vast, and the sins of the past are many. Hold tight to each other and never stop dreaming. So here we have the Natural Fantasy, bringing us deep into worlds deeply permeated by the cycles of time and nature, where young heroes face the consequences of past mistakes and demonstrate that history does not have to repeat itself. We've got 4 new classes: the Floralist, the Gourmet, the Invoker, and the Merchant, along with new heroic skills. For those of you keeping track at home, there are now, I don't know, someone have to tell me, I don't know, probably 25 plus jobs or classes for Fabula Ultima. And unlike in a traditional D&D system, these are meant to be mixed and matched. You literally cannot go an entire Fabula Ultima campaign as one class. You can't even start the game as one class. You have to start at least with 2 classes. You start at level 5. We've got new quirks, optional rules that add more depth to your characters, and take a break to share a convivial moment with Camp Activities, which is a new system introduced in Natural Fantasy. 5 villains, 208 pages, 10 Natural Fantasy locations, archetypal locations that you can drop into your campaign. Craft equipment and tools with any materials that you gather, with our rules for custom weapons and forging. I will say that the custom weapon rules have been sort of repeated in each of the atlases so far. I don't know if these will be different than they have been in the past atlases, but that is something I will critique because the custom weapon rules I don't think need to keep being repeated. Thanks, Dr. Metropolis.
DR Metropolis tipped $3. Just finished Visions of Mana, so I'm looking forward to the themes explored here, not just mechanics.
Absolutely. And we'll get into this because the book does a great job of this. Obviously we have our sort of natural touchstones for high fantasy and techno fantasy in our Final Fantasy genre. But I don't know that we've really ever had a natural fantasy Final Fantasy. For natural fantasy, you do have to look into some other JRPGs. And for me, that is usually I think of Secret of Mana and Legends of Mana. I think of the Mana series. And the idea of natural fantasy, I think, is very much tied into some of the ideas that permeate a lot of the ideas of some of the more highbrow anime, if you want to call it that. I think that it's definitely got its own unique style, and I think that's pretty cool. Pepper says, I think the idea is that you could pick up the core book and whatever atlas and just run with it. And I totally respect that. I really do. But I also, I own all 3 books. So at a certain point, it becomes kind of repeating it, right? Let's see here. Definitely anime. It's Daryl. It's absolutely anime influenced. It's absolutely anime influenced. Lance suggests that we check out the inspiration since the end of the book, and you know what? Let's actually let's cut ahead. That's actually a good idea, just because I think we want to get into that. So just real quick, game design, writing, and development all done by our friend, our fellow patron member, Emmanuel Galetto. So it's a homegrown effort here. Here we go. So they always do a good job here of talking about what inspired them. So we have The Atelier by Gustin Koei, Bistro Heroes, The Drowned City, Etrian, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. That's an interesting thing. Okay, Crystal Chronicles, which is kind of like was one of the more like, I guess you would say kiddie ones. And yes, Natural Fantasy is very Ghibli. Yes, I agree. Secret of Mana, Princess Mononoke. Yes, exactly. Very, very much. This idea that nature is, and again, I'm sure that they talk about this in the book, but like this idea that nature, techno fantasy sets it up that like nature is like the thing that absolutely must be protected at all costs. And natural fantasy really takes the idea that people are part of the natural world. They're not apart from it. They are part of it. I think that's like one of the core conceits of it. But Shadow of the Colossus, Jade Cocoon, Legend of Zelda, Breath of Wild, Wild Arms 3, Tears of the Kingdom, and The Wind Waker. I'm probably one of the few people in the existence who likes The Wind Waker. It's actually one of my favorite Zelda games, although I have not played the new ones from the Switch. Among non-video game inspirations, we must mention Dungeon Meshi. And, of course, here we see Valley of the Wind, Princess Mononoke. We have, Symbaroum, an RPG. The Wild Sea. These are all games that we've covered here. Flavor text from the Kamigawa set in Magic the Gathering. I just love how inspired, Emmanuel is by just such a wider range of different media types and amazing. Now, of course, I'm not an anime, expert by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to like skip over anything that's amazing. I just probably don't know it. Have you watched it already? Mark's Mayhem. So I don't like anime, but as part of a you could call it a sort of a game. But Bob, my co-host here, loves it, as does Tim, sort of one of our KLC adjacent members. And so we all watched it as part of a exclusive Patreon stream. And I only got through about 3 or 4 episodes, and I was like, okay, this is enough for me. Everyone got it. And then Bob and Tim liked it so much that they've been continuing to watch it on some Sundays. And some patrons hop into the studio or to the theater room on Discord, and we enjoy it. I don't know if they're still doing the watch along, KC, but they were. All right. So fantastic here. All right, so let's get into it. So table of contents, we have an introduction section. I mean, I'm just going to say this before, and I'll say it again. I love the layout of the books. I love the graphic design. I love the use of color, simple 2-column layout, very clear, precise headers, small little iconography. It's just very, very clear cut, and I really appreciate that. So we start off with a couple of pages about what is natural fantasy. Then we get into the world, and we talk about what is a natural fantasy location. And again, with all the atlases, I mean, it wouldn't be an atlas if you didn't have locations. And what Emmanuel does with these atlases is he gives you, 8 to 12 locations that are kind of iconic. They're kind of tropey in a sense, but they have a lot of detail with adventure hooks and ideas for how you might use this in your natural fantasy game. And it's just a great way to espouse the sort of low prep play style that Fabula Ultima encourages. We then talk about conflicts, magics, and ritual rules, updates to those. We talk about technology, including materials and forging, and a random generator for materials. So you get your it's hyperlinked. Thank you. We've got a list of rare items. These are the special magical items that you might find during the course of a campaign. And of course, artifacts, which are those campaign altering, and they kind of defy the normal rules of magical items and sort of do very powerful, strong, unique things. Then we have an example of what makes a hero a natural fantasy hero, talking about some of the themes or tones or ideas that go into that, what makes them different from perhaps some of the other atlases. To a certain extent, you shouldn't be able to pick up Cloud and drop them into any, maybe Aerith would be appropriate in a natural fantasy setting, but maybe Cloud doesn't, right? Or Sid or Barrett. And then we get some sample characters. We get some new options, including, again, the rules for custom weapons, some lists of quirks, some of which are going to be new to natural fantasy, our information on what we can do during camp phases, and then we get 4 new classes and along with a list of heroic skills. Lastly, we round it out with a couple of villains that you can use as sort of lieutenants or even arch enemies, arch ultimate super bad villains for your natural fantasy campaign. So there we go. Again, there's something about the style of art here that is very appealing to me. It is definitely anime inspired, but it is not, in my opinion, it is not anime, but I could be wrong. All right, this expansion to the core rulebook and focuses on a genre mainly defined by the truly ancient secrets, vast uncontaminated territories, heroes who are both humble and persistent, and antagonists driven by unbridled curiosity, as well as by their fear of death and the unknown, along with powerful manifestations of elemental forces. And we get a nice sidebar here. Emmanuel's very good with his sidebars. I think it's wonderful the way that he talks to he talks to you as the author of the book, and he also talks to you as your friend. Jake says it can't be anime because I don't like anime and I like this. Jake, kind of, yes. I mean, one of the definitions of is something anime is does Derek not like it? And if I don't like it, then it's anime. For example, and by the way, there are people who are very vociferous about this because people will be like, Avatar isn't anime. It's not made in Japan or whatever. And I'm like, I like Avatar. I do like Avatar. This atlas differs slightly from the core rulebook and our previous atlases because its stories are usually far more delicate and less bombastic, but no less heroic. On the contrary, it deliberately explores the fundamental concepts at the roots of conflict in every other genre: community, harmony, and coexistence. Interesting. When compared to the genres of high fantasy and techno fantasy covered in previous works, natural fantasy is less frequently the focus of JRPG style works, and this book doesn't presume to be a complete guide to it. Some sections are tied more closely than others to their author's creative and philosophical inclinations. Their goal is to provide advice and examples from inspirational works. Turn the page to learn more. Awesome. So, what defines Fabula Ultima natural fantasy? Common people. These are usually the player characters in natural fantasy campaigns are usually everyday people, albeit possessing some unusual abilities. The princes, archmages, dark knights, and sky pirates found in other genres give way to explorers, alchemists, scholars, and wandering warriors. These protagonists are often young and unaware of the great mysteries of the world, with exceptions of a few fragmented legends which have scopes of different interpretations. The focal points of a natural fantasy style are rediscovery, understanding, empathy, respect, and a love for the world we live in and are part of, as well as its past. Looking for answers with curiosity and humility. So right there off the rip, I think that's a cool point. I mean, in our own Fabula Ultima campaign that we're building, we're using technospheres from Atlas High Fantasy. Kaz's character is this, this tinkerer necromancer who has like harnessed the spirits of souls, and he is the one who has created the technosphere. So he's like the chief scientist of the empire, right? He's this hugely important person who obviously comes to realize the evils of what he's done and has, turned against the empire and is now going to fight it as part of that sort of high fantasy or techno fantasy vibe. But, Natural fantasy is more just about ordinary people coming from ordinary origins. They aren't these great princes and archmages at the beginning of the game. The mentor. In spite of what we just said, it is possible to play as a character who knows a lot, but in natural fantasy, these kinds of characters have two key traits. First, they are hesitant, or they hesitate to share their wisdom, often revealing crucial information only when they find it absolutely crucial. And second, they aren't able to solve the world's problem without the rest of the group. A classic example is an old scholar who's discovered an ancient power which might be able to protect the region, but it is said to be exclusive to a certain bloodline, which they are not a part of. Of course, the role of mentors should be limited to one character per group, usually the oldest. More often than not, this protagonist will end up having to reconsider how much they really know and may even face a personal crisis, eventually finding the answers they need in their younger companions. Side tangent, one of my favorite playbooks of all time from any PBTA game is the Avatar Legends game, where all of the playbooks in Avatar Legends are written under the presumption that you are basically a young person, probably in your late teens or early 20s, maybe 15 or 14 at the youngest. And, you're struggling with concepts of identity and getting your own power. So there's always this kind of a teenage hero vibe, which if you know Avatar, you'll know is pretty accurate for most of those characters. But there is a playbook in, I think it's in Washi Tung's book, which is called the Mentor. And it basically is that sort of Uncle Iroh playbook. And the idea of the Mentor is completely radically different from all the other playbooks in the game, because you're not there to discover yourself. It's there to help and encourage along these other characters, which I think is interesting. Also, which is one of my favorite playbooks of all time, Daryl. So this is one of the reasons that Emmanuel released the PDF early is because it hasn't gone to print yet. So we've got about a week or 2 weeks to catch any sort of spelling, goofs or things like that. So Daryl, maybe maybe we can keep a running list or something like that. But yes, I did. If you use crucial twice, maybe it would. Maybe we should use a different word there. And Pepper, you're right. It is the name of the playbook from Avatar is called The Elder. Vertical development. Interesting. Natural fantasy campaigns are often set in small regions or villages rather than entire continents and cities, but compensate this limited perspective with vertical development. The current world was built upon countless layers of history, where terrible powers and wondrous magics are buried. These are truly ancient worlds where the past is millennia away rather than centuries. So the causes of today's misfortunes are often incomprehensible. I wonder if that's where that idea of dungeon meshi comes in, right? Because the idea of dungeon meshi, right, is that the dungeon is it's a mega dungeon, basically. But the idea is that you're moving through the layers of history as you go down, which, by the way, if you watch our mega dungeon stream, you'll know I talked about that one of my favorite things to do with mega dungeons is this idea that you are not just going down in the depths and the difficulty and the monsters are getting tougher and the treasure's getting better, but you're literally going almost back in time to the very ancient origins and beginnings of some, wonderful and amazing place, maybe even back thousands of years to the very beginning of civilization. Natural fantasy mostly does away with epic and spectacular aesthetics, instead presenting Fabula Ultima's thematic core in a visceral and sincere way, involving the protagonist on an intimate and personal level. These are stories about life and death. Like fairy tales, the philosophies and traditions that inspired it, the natural fantasy style presents death as a necessary step for the world to regenerate. A terrible pain, and yet an opportunity to appreciate life, a meaningful act which cannot be inflicted lightly nor be stripped of its solemnity. I think that is very appropriate. Right now my family is, my dad is essentially in hospice basically at this point, and he is going on the end of his own journey. And, one of the things that I think for me is this idea that death is a part of life. And I think natural fantasy, buys into that. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. It's heavy stuff for sure to handle, in an RPG. And not every, it's not always, sometimes people just want to beat monsters up, Main references. So here we go. We talked about these already. I guess we got a little ahead of ourselves. Okay. So the Fabula Ultima is built around 8 pillars, and they're still the same here, but it builds on these elements in its own way. So one of the things I like about the style is this idea of that Emmanuel wrote is that, hey, look, you should build whatever campaign you want to build. In fact, you need to. I'm not going to give you a campaign setting. It's going to be up to you and your players to collaboratively build it. And some of it will be built during session 0 or session 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, but a lot of it will be built during play. But in order for this to be a Fabula Ultima game, your campaign that you construct has to be built upon these 8 pillars. These are the 8 pillars of Fabula Ultima. I don't care what you do, as long as you respect and build upon these 8 pillars. So we have ancient ruins and harsh lands. I just all these little statements always just make me like, I want to play this game, like it gets me so excited, The wind blows strong among the cavities of the jungle trees. Rumor has it that in the past, a skilled navigator could use the thermal updrafts to fly over the hunting grounds of the Dingaguars and reach the shattered city, and I just immediately have this mental image of these treetop cities and a forest floor that is, haunted by these terrible, horrible raptor lizard things and these awesome, cool flying machines, kind of like Aang's flying kite. And off in the distance, you can see, buried in the jungle, far away as on foot, this ancient city that is beyond all memory of your community because you guys have been living in these trees for who knows how many hundreds of years. Anyways, it's amazing. A world in peril. In natural fantasy, humanity is defined by its relationship to the creatures of the wilderness. Some coexist with them, others hunt them for food or protection. Far more dangerous are those creatures born of ancient curses and experiments, not to mention any antagonists who make an improper or self-serving use of magic. So we still have a world that needs saving, but one of the ideas here is that, it's all about our relationship with the wilderness. And even with these creatures, it's not like everybody's like, oh, we're all druids and we all love the animals. No, sometimes animals need to be hunted for both food, for protection. They're dangerous predators. We're a part of that cycle of life and death. Clashes between communities are often between different factions on a much smaller scale, neighboring villages or clans, fights between humans and animals or spirits, or even between opposing party of its same people. In its darkest form, it might erupt into violence, expropriation, or even genocide. Newly arrived in the village and terrified by a spiked wildcat sighted by his caravan during the journeyman, a nobleman has ordered the local hunters guild to exterminate all predators in the region. When they refuse to kill any creature that hasn't attacked the settlement, the noble hires some mercenaries from the citadel amidst the plains. So you can see that's part of it, Everything has a soul. So this pillar is both central and explicit in natural fantasy. The stream of souls manifests as elemental entities, animals, plants, veritable holy symbols that embody the life cycle of regeneration and transformation. It's also the main victim of our villains' actions, right? So the idea here is that villains in natural fantasy are people who disrupt that sort of natural soul cycle. It reminds me of D&D, and it reminds me of 3rd edition, and the final adventure that my first group of third edition characters to go to 20th level did was this idea was there was this dragon, Archetypal, which a lot of people have heard of. And Archetypal has become such the ultimate predator that this red dragon has moved to the plane, the bastion of unborn souls, and is literally consuming souls directly out of sort of the reincarnation stream of the universe. To grow infinitely strong, basically. And so, literally across the multiverse, babies are being born without souls. This, it's an affront to the very cycle of life and death in our set nature. Keegan says everything has a soul in techno fantasy as well. This is true, Keegan, because it's one of the key pillars. But the thing you have to remember is that in techno fantasy, it is not necessarily as explicit. Right? In this genre, you are living with these soul creatures. They are right down the road from you. You can see it in the lands and the waters. In techno fantasy, it's usually a little bit more like, it starts off with Mako energy in Final Fantasy VII, and then you start to learn about the live stream, and then it's more of like not everybody's necessarily aware of how important this is. By the way, for those of you who have joined maybe a little bit late, we have 2 stream goals today. One is to do another campaign setting stream. We'll probably do Dragonlance next, or Forgotten Realms. I could be convinced to do either. But we could do Dragonlance, we could do Forgotten Realms. And the other one is to get Rooster, Emmanuel, a.k.a. Emmanuel Galetto, the author of Fabula Ultima, onto the stream. And maybe we can do another interview with a game designer. Additionally, I am giving away, speaking of Emmanuel, I am giving away a physical copy of the Techno Fantasy Atlas. And in addition to that, it is signed by the author. Generically signed, because I got these signed at Gen Con to do as giveaway gifts. So if you're interested in joining the giveaway, type !join, and you'll be entered into the drawing. Okay, magic and technology. The juxtaposition is a powerful element here. Both can have a light and a dark side. Magic is tied to natural elements, but it can destabilize them. Heroes of many shapes and sizes. The natural fantasy genre focuses upon the difficult journey towards coexistence and harmony. As such, player characters represent a fundamental opportunity to show how representatives of different cultures and different people can work together. It's all about the heroes. Natural fantasy protagonists may not look as extraordinary as other heroes, but in reality, they embody the deepest meaning of heroism. Humility, respect for life, looking for dialogue, choosing the hard path, and fighting cruelty and ignorance with fiery compassion. From this point of view, the world has desperate need for people like them. When their village was destroyed by the Hill Clan during their hunt for miasma beasts, an old witch and a young blacksmith joined forces with a deserter and a wandering swordswoman in an attempt to outpace the army and prevent it from claiming a stone stele that, according to the Satyr tradition, gives access to the power of the Triclopean god. Sounds cool. And this is something that we've talked about before on this stream, but drama, right, is when ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary situations, right? And a lot of times in our TTRPGs, we have extraordinary people in extraordinary situations. And that's like, that's a different type of genre. It's the difference between watching Gandalf battle the Balrog versus watching Frodo and Sam, right, climb Mount Doom. They're both heroic, but there's a different style. There's a different tone there. And Frodo and Sam sort of represent the everyman or the everywoman. They're not super extraordinary by any stretch of the imagination, but they are the deepest of heroes. In fact, most people would agree that the biggest hero of Lord of the Rings is Sam. And maybe you could make an argument for Frodo, but most of the time, most people agree it's Sam. Not Gandalf the Maiar. It's not Legolas, the nearly immortal elf. It's not, the heir of Elendil. It's not the son, it's not Gimli, son of Glóin. It's, this hobbit. And even amongst the hobbits, Sam is particularly humble, right? Frodo is essentially a wealthy landowner. He may not be nobility, but he's very wealthy. He comes from wealthy means and wealthy families and has a very nice pedigree. He's essentially a landed noble, whereas Pippin and Merry are quite literally essentially nobility. And Sam is just a gardener. Like Sam is the blue collar person in the Hobbit's crew. And he becomes the big hero. And lastly, mystery, discovery, and growth. Given its focus on travel, exploration, and encounters between different people and discoveries of ancient path, mysteries and growth are 2 key elements of natural fantasy. At the same time, this genre questions the consequences of the application of knowledge and how it can be used for good and evil. So that's a cool little tone point to pick up there. This idea that, because I'm always when I run campaigns, this is true basically of almost any campaign, even D&D, I suppose. But especially when I'm running something like Fabula Ultima or a Powered by the Apocalypse game, I'm always looking for questions. Questions that I don't necessarily have an answer to, but I want answers. I want the players to answer them. And it's this idea of like, is knowledge a good thing or a bad thing? And Jake says, yes, exactly. A great quote from Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should, right? And I don't necessarily have a dog in that fight. Like I just want to see what the players answer, and I want to see how they answer it, and I want to see how their characters, come to that answer. And I think that's really cool. All right. A couple of things specific to natural fantasy. Raw beauty. The natural fantasy style relies on a balance between moments of calm, serenity, and beauty with moments of raw and direct contact with the inevitable facts of life. Neither can be sacrificed. Keeping only the first presents a false and sanitized version of nature. Keeping only the second leads to self-indulging morbidity. So you want a balance, right? Just like nature. You're going to have tender, beautiful, serene moments, but don't be afraid to show the brutal and uncaring and even deadly side of natural fantasy, of nature. The hunt. Killing other living creatures to protect your community or to provide resources is a common theme of natural fantasy and should be handled with care. Never minimize, be it that of an animal, plant, person, or spirit. Death is a significant event that should be dignified. Never demonize. If necessity demands it and proper respect is shown for the consequences, killing another creature to save lives, protect the ecosystem, or transform their body into nourishment, tools, or instrument is an integral part of the cycle of life, not a violation of the cycle of life. Cut to my problem with druids in D&D. I always think it's very strange the way that a lot of druids are presented, or a lot of the way that people present druids. It's like they present themselves as these sort of like weird eco-terrorists. But it's like, I feel like they should be more about like maintaining balance rather than being like, no, you can't hunt here. No animal can be harmed. It's like, well, that's not the way nature works. I mean, these animals are killing each other, right? I mean, I know that some people obviously have more gradated views of druids, which is good. That's a good thing to do. But I think a lot of druids are just, they're painted into a corner unnecessarily. Yeah, more. This only means something if you know magic. More Golgari, less tree hugging. Exactly. This idea that a druid should be sort of, in magic terms, right, green and black. It's about growth and death. It's about the cycles of life, not just, I don't know, everything. Nothing can die, and only animals matter. Every life matters. Coexistence doesn't mean self-erasure. In some stories, ecological themes are handled quite superficially. Humanity is depicted as a parasite, technology as a source of corruption. I think this is very true of like high fantasy. Or not, I keep saying high fantasy. Techno fantasy. In techno fantasy, a lot of times the themes are that like humanity is a parasite, that's draining away all the resources of the world, that is, out of sync with nature, blah, blah, blah. Their technology is a corruption. It's killing the planet. It's destroying everything, right? That's a very techno fantasy belief. Here, though, and ancient lifestyles become romanticized and stereotyped, often without a solid historical anthropology, right? Everything was so much better when we lived in peaceful, natural settings. Although they provide fertile ground for villains, such simplistic perspectives represent a form of cowardly nihilism. What a word, what a term. What natural fantasy proposes is instead to make a humble and brave choice. Our heroes must stop seeing themselves as masters or tormentors of nature, and remember that they are merely one of its many expressions, embracing the responsibilities that arise from their ability to invent, create, and transform. In short, we can coexist with the planet we live in precisely because we are humans, not in spite of it. And I've used this story before, but it's like one of the things I really loved about sailing is that, not boating, sailing, is that when you're sailing, you know, you are harnessing the wind, right? You're taking the natural forces of the wind and the waves, and you are using them to you're binding them to your bidding, shaping and redirecting them using your technology in order to gain, movement and speed and to go places. But at the same time, you are entirely reliant upon those forces. And if they go away, you got nothing. And if they overpower you, you're gone. So it's like, who's the master there? Is it the sailor or is it the sea? And I think the answer is neither, And so for me, sailing always felt like this very symbiotic relationship between myself and, nature, the wind and the waves, and having to be so keenly attuned to what was going on around me in the environment so that I could control it gave me respect for it in a way that I hadn't previously experienced. Cultural influences and colonialism. We imagine a story around sharing and coexistence. We are often influenced by existing cultures. Historically, however, those same cultures have been targeted by violent and repressive politics. Their cultural appearances are often trivialized to mere appearances. Hey, Sunhawk.
Sunhawk tipped $50 for defending Sar Henry's name from the Slender.
For defending the great name of Saran Ray, or Saren Ray, as I call her, from Slander. Yes, exactly. I still say Saren Ray is my favorite Galarian goddess, or god. Thank you, Sunhawk. Sunhawk. I didn't even notice it was $50. I just saw it as like 15 or something like that. Sunhawk, thank you so much. That's incredible. You don't know why I'd saved that message? Okay. It was just random. I was like, is Saren Ray, are you like trying to say that like it's related to the druid thing? I was like, did I mention Saren Ray? All right. Well, Sunhawk, what did you really mean to say? But thank you, Sunhawk. Harvey, what's going on, Harvey? It was blank when I tipped. Shrug. Apparently, it just saved your last one. How that's so weird. Well, you know what though?
I am strong.
That's for you, Sunhawk.
Strong.
Thank you, Sunhawk. Harvey says, I always found it incredibly disjointed in games where metal, and by extension machinery, as something produced from the earth, is at its very concept anathema to natural forces. It can coexist. And I think that's the question, Harvey, of like a natural fantasy game is like, is a wind, let's say you have a water wheel, is a water wheel by a group of community of people, is that an affront to nature, or is that just a part of nature and they're just using nature? And I think there's definitely a spectrum there. And I think maybe there is no great answer. And that's the question that you have to ask. But that's really funny, Sunhawk. I've never seen that before. So maybe that's just the first time. Thank you, Sunhawk, though. What about sailing on a sea of trees with a chainsaw boat? No comment. Again, I like the Wild Sea. I think it's a great game. I think it's really, it's a very unique tone or theme and setting. I don't know that I can fully get behind it, even if I like the mechanics. But yeah, although in that world, right, like the forest isn't natural, it's unnatural. So I suppose ripping it up with your chainsaw boat is okay. Ludo, well, that's because YouTube hates us. That's because YouTube hates us. Okay. I mean, look at that art. That art's awesome. This like ancient, very Shadows of the Colossus kind of feel to it, maybe. I don't know if this is like an ancient golem or some sort of ancient temple or rune or monolith. We've got our natural fantasy character, some weird forest creature with two tails. It's very cool. All right, here we go. Natural fantasy locations. We're going to talk about some examples. I'm not going to go through all of these. We're just going to pick a couple of them. We'll talk a little bit about conflicts, magics, rituals, technologies, and some of the rare items and artifacts. So, if you haven't played Fabula Ultima, then you'll know that when you're going around, you create your world collaboratively as part of a session 0. But also, you're not encouraged to design the entire map. And so during the course of play, you're going to naturally need to create new regions, towns, or locations. This then provides some interesting suggestions and even some examples that you can use in your campaign. In other words, these atlases are designed to be a very convenient drag and drop toolbox that the game master and the group can call upon in order to add in, cool ideas that don't require a lot of work. A key element that sets natural fantasy apart is simple, but should never be taken for granted. It's the tension between a mostly forgotten past and an unpredictable future, a maelstrom of visions of ruin and hope. Right? So to be narratively alive and inspired, a natural fantasy location should exist in the present, the liminal space between these vague extremes, showing the signs of a past not fully understood and holding in its hands a fragile future, which will blossom only if it's protected without suffering. So is the layout unique to this book or uniform to other FU books? It is uniform to all the other FU books, Daryl. All of the books are written in this style and what's the word I'm looking for? Written in this style and graphical layout elements. So if I open up, so this is the high fantasy book. So here's high fantasy locations, allegorical places, a crescendo, elemental, attunement, a source of power, connections, and here's our sample location. So this is the Kingdom of Veneria is one of this is from high fantasy, not from natural fantasy, but they're all basically like that. Okay. Complex cultures and communities. The reconstruction, natural fantasy worlds have weathered many catastrophes, but the ability to get back up after disaster to reinvent and rebuild a world together is a recurring theme. But it might take two opposite forms. It could be hope and adaptability, or it could be reactionary nostalgia. So again, this is a great way to sort of lay out the tension and the conflicts in your group or in your campaign. Maybe a villain, right, just wants to, they're idolizing the past, and maybe that past once brought untold ruin, but they don't see it that way because they want to sort of move back. And it's this idea, this tension, right, between progress and respecting the past, but also, respecting the future. And I think that's what's really interesting about this space. All right, here we go. This is something I saw, and I didn't really quite know what they meant. Vertical worlds. Some natural fantasy campaigns are characterized by vertical exploration of the setting. The story often starts on the surface and develops underground, but it is also possible of the opposite. For example, the campaign might focus on the long descent into the depths of a chasm, containing a huge variety of ecosystems, or the gradual ascent of a world tree, so vast that its branches host entire regions, lakes, and colossal ruins. For the sake of brevity, no matter if the story develops upwards or downwards, from this point on, this kind of setting is called Abyss. Although playing Fabula Ultima with an Abyss setting isn't much different than usual, there are a few adjustments to consider during your collaborative world creation. 1. The flowchart that you use in the core rulebook should be replaced with one on the next page. Origins. The player character's birthplaces are almost never visited during this type of campaign, but the origin trait can still be invoked. So this is basically the natural fantasy mega dungeon. And now when you get the PDF, there is, let me actually bring that up. Should have downloaded it. Didn't. It's my fault. Minecraft, the TTRPG. Yeah, maybe. Go down to the diamond layer. Although I think they changed that. Oh, yes, we do have an Abyss sheet. So this is the Abyss sheet. So you can see here, right? You start up here with the starting settlement, and then you have your first layer, second layer, third layer, fourth layer, fifth layer, and then the heart, right? And so there's this idea, right, of you going down into some sort of, series of layers. Traveling the Abyss. Journeys across a single stratum follow the normal rules, but moving between two adjacent strata requires some sort of connection, like a tower or a flight of stairs or a frozen waterfall. In addition to the connections established during Step 5, your group might introduce or discover new passages and shortcuts during the campaign. Safe zones. To ensure that the group has a chance to rest, buy and sell items, or be rescued in the event of a total surrender, make sure to periodically introduce safe havens across the various strata of the Abyss, or include fast travel options to and from the main settlement. Ancient elevators or portals are good options for this. And this, by the way, is like the same advice I give when I talk about mega dungeons, which is like one of the cool things to do is like when you're building a mega dungeon, is to make the players have to go physically through it, but then you can introduce things like portals that they can kind of connect to or access or learn about or find through secret message. If you've played the Gauntlet, what's it called? Abomination Vaults. They do this in Abomination Vaults. Each level has a secret portal that you can link into to let you basically fast travel the dungeon. And Dungeon Meshi is absolutely an Abyss dungeon. I didn't even watch it more than 3 or 4 episodes, and I know enough to know that. In fact, the premise of Dungeon Meshi is kind of cool. I don't mind it. It's a little weird. The whole eating monsters part. It's the other parts that I think are interesting. Like, I don't like the thing I didn't like about Dungeon Meshi. I could get past some of the art style. It's fine. And some of the characters are a little bit, too much because that's what they are in anime. Screaming and over emoting and all this stuff. It was the whole like obsession with like, let's really focus on the details of making Hydra soup, That's the part that I didn't really like. Sure, sounds like Heart. That's a great example of that. So this is an alternate way. Normally when you do a campaign creation, by the way, if you're not familiar, in Fabula Ultima, normally you have like a world map, or at least a continent map, and you're putting some locations on it. And the idea is that your campaign is going to be traveling all over the world, journeying, maybe by chocobo or airship. So the idea here is that you're more focused on maybe this one location, and it's this idea of descending. Or like I said, maybe you're going up. Maybe you start at the bottom and you're working your way up this massive tree. So we choose if the abyss develops up or down. Is it a great chasm that none has ever seen the bottom of, or an endless tower that stretches past the clouds? Take the abyss sheet and put a starting settlement at its top or bottom where the game will begin. Each participant, that means you, the GM, but also the players, the PCs, should contribute at least one of the settlement's NPCs or landmarks. For instance, a well-stocked general store or a librarian with an expertise in archaeology. At the very opposite end sits the heart of the abyss and the campaign's goal. Choose what it is: a world-saving resource, the answer to a terrible question, or an entity to be sealed before it's too late. And I gotta say, I like the idea of doing this. I mean, you could totally do this. Fabula Ultima by default starts at level 5 and has a max level of level 50. Doesn't mean it has to go to level 50, but that's a long time. Even if you're leveling up, once a session, it's still 45 sessions, which for most people is going to take at least a year, if not longer. But I kind of like the idea of maybe doing an Abyss-themed campaign and having it be more, not necessarily short, but more of a shortened campaign. And the whole campaign is, that this group of ordinary folks has to go down into the abyss and, get this world-saving resource or seal away an entity before it's too late. And it's really hyper-focused on that one particular set of events. And maybe it only goes from like level 5 to 20. Or 5 to 30 or something like that, and then ends. I think that's kind of cool. What is the role of magic and technology in this settlement? What are the kind of tools and machineries available? Then create the strata of the abyss. Those are each of the layers. 5 areas that separate the starting settlement from the heart. Give each one a name and roughly define its ecosystem, flora, and fauna, and then include at least one connection between each pair, including the heart and the starting settlement. For each stratum, create a historical event still firmly ingrained in the memory of the settlement and an enigma or mystery surrounding the stratum. Create a threat for each stratum: an environmental danger, a curse, or a terrible monster that every explorer has heard about. The most terrible threat lies in the heart. You could broadly discuss that now or leave it for later in the campaign. So, basically you end up creating these kind of like, You've got your starting area, and then you've got 5 levels and the heart, and each different strata could represent a new set of challenges, right? Which is really cool. One of the most common ways to create a natural fantasy location that is memorable is to base it upon the contrast between 2 opposite elements, such as air and earth or ice and fire. For example, icy plains dotted with bubbling geysers, or rocky deserts swept by the wind, or oceanic depths inhabited by electric creatures, or the contrast between old and new. For example, a vast horizon of skeletal skyscrapers overgrown by vegetation and taken over by the nests of gigantic feathery creatures, or an endless grassland where herds of bovine calmly graze in the shadow of rusty Titanic war machines. Lots of beasts, animals, and plants, constructs, elementals. And here we have 10 sample locations. And again, we're not going to go through all of these, but I'm just going to kind of show you one so we can get a feel for it. So this is the Badger Temple, the ancient shrine. So the archetype here is the ancient shrine, right? You could use this, you can call it whatever you want, you could do it forever, but the stereotypical element here is the ancient shrine. Like when you think natural fantasy, when you think certain elements of Legend of Zelda or Secret of Mana, you think the ancient shrine, right? In some lost, forgotten woods, right? Outside of the village, people don't go there. They say the spirits walk freely, right? That kind of vibe. Few truly know what lurks behind the quiet of this enigmatic place lost in the depths of the forest. The locals never cross its threshold, even during celebrations, and the youngsters show great respect to those who enter just the first chamber. Moss and lichens cover the wall of the now forgotten Badger Temple, and its secret should be forgotten as well. So, this is what they do. It's such a cool way, such a great way to build locations. I even like the idea. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but what I want to do, I usually have like a note card right by me. I don't. What I love the idea of doing is creating like 3x5 note cards and just making these kind of locations. And if I was doing a Fabula Ultima campaign, particularly in person, I love the idea of having these kind of as a go-to, either as random locations or stuff like that. But this is kind of how this is like the shortcut for the Badger Temple. Now, of course, being that it's the natural fantasy book, you get a lot of extra details. Okay. Right. And these are all hooks and story hooks. This isn't a lore dump, right? Because the Badger Temple isn't like a specific thing. It's whatever you need it to be. Okay. But all of their atlases do this. Okay. Like for example, this is from High Fantasy. This is the starting kingdom of Oneria, but really the trope here is the great starting kingdom, right? It's the place where, the good king still reigns before the evil comes. Well, this is the Badger Temple. So one of the things they have here is this idea of just keywords. What does that mean? Nothing. It's just designed for inspiration. It's designed so that you can, at a glance, understand what's going on here. Like, what are list 3 words that sort of tell you what you need to know about the Badger Temple. Curse, trial, seal. Right? Yes, exactly, Dr. Metropolis. Although I like to call it Corneria because that's what it was originally called on the NES translation. This is the atlas that's going to get me to play FU. Nice. Yes, in High Fantasy, right? Oneria was adventure, home, longing, nest. But back to our natural fantasy. So the next thing is themes. So if you have an adventure here, remember I talked about like what are the questions that as a GM, I'm interested in questions. I'm interested in putting my player characters into difficult positions, challenging positions, because ultimately I want to know how they are going to respond. And I'm curious to see what kind of answers they come up with. And so this place is about facing one's fears, gaining self-awareness, gaining self-confidence, understanding the past to build the future. Terrain, stone, vines, water. When I just say those 3 words, imagine a Legend of Zelda game and imagine a dungeon and with the words stone, vines, and water. I bet you're already painting a mental picture of what that place would look like, right? Maybe it's an older Zelda, so it's kind of pixel arty. You know, and you've got these like it's like a water dungeon, but there's this gray stone and ancient carvings and everything's vine encrusted and light filters down from above, right? Right. All right. So travel roll has to do it with the mechanics of the game. Travel roll is basically how dangerous is a place. This isn't super dangerous. But the higher the D20 roll, so the higher the die, the more dangerous it is to travel through an area. D8, D10, D12, D20 would be very dangerous. Common elements. These are the generic symbols that are used in Fabula Ultima. Fabula Ultima is based off around, I'm going to get it wrong. Is it 6 or 8 elements? So the common elements here are, I don't know the symbols by heart yet. I know this is air and fire. Those are the rare ones. And then this is light, earth, and dark. Yeah, probably dark. So there you go. Light, dark, and earth, and rarely air and fire. And then here are just some generic dangers, right? Again, this is like a way that you can very much low prep, no prep, run this game. A huge sentient plant guarding the path, a magical mist that fuels the senses, a barrier created by statues that flank the entrance. Discoveries, a spirit protector of the forest, a plant with miraculous properties, a shrine holding a prodigious blessing. All right, I will stop here real quick. I will say this. I love Fabula Ultima. I think it's a great game, and I think the production designs are a second to none. However, some of the icons for the elements aren't my favorite. Okay, while they aren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, the one that gets me the most is the triple banana, and this represents the air. This represents air, and then this represents dark. I may be biased here, but I am a big fan, okay, generically, of the options from Gloomhaven. And not because I think that they're like perfect. I just think that generically and of course, obviously, some of these aren't perfect either, but I think the fire symbol, the air symbol, the cold symbol, the darkness symbol, right, showing the eclipse, the light symbol. I mean, the light symbols are almost identical, right? Look at the two light symbols, right? I think it's fine. So I don't like, for example, the Gloomhaven's earth symbol is this, kind of leafy thing. I don't necessarily know that I love that. I kind of prefer the rock, right? And the fire symbols, are kind of evil, equivalent almost. But like the wind symbol, come on. The Gloomhaven wind symbol is just like, that's wind. I see that gray symbol. I think it's wind, right? Anyways. Roll for Combat wants me to show the Eldamon symbols. All right. Hold on. I got to bring up Eldamon. Eldamon, gonna catch 'em. It's hard so true. We'll level up and pull us through. You tank for me and I'll tank for you. Eldamon. All right, here we go. All right, so Eldamon. All right, air. We've got a very Gloomhaven-inspired swoosh. It's even gray. Kind of got that gray, bluish gray color, and it's definitely got the wind. I give this a very high rating. All right, this is darkness. Okay, we got the moon and the stars. I like this. I think this is very good for darkness. This might be the best. Okay, let's say this. I like Gloomhaven's. All right, we're going to. Do I have these all? No. Window capture. Okay, so Gloomhaven's wind is that gray one, and then Eldamon's is that one, and then the Fabula Ultima is this bananas. So it's going to go to Eldamon. Darkness. I'm not going to do all of them. I'm just going to do the ones that we have here. So in Fabula Ultima, it is a red skull. In Eldamon, it is the moon and the stars. And in Gloomhaven, it is sort of an eclipsing sun. I'm going to give it to Eldamon again. I think this is good. KC, I'm colorblind, so that could be a thing. All right, next up is Earth. So we got the rock here, which is good. I like that. Gloomhaven uses this, leaf on a green. I don't know if I love that. Ooh, I don't know. I think I'm going to have to give this one to Fabula Ultima. I think just having a big rock makes the most sense. Next is light. We've got a starbursty symbol here. Gloomhaven has essentially the same thing. I don't know which one I actually like better. Yeah, maybe the Gloomhaven one. And then Eldamon has a sun. All right, so they're all very similar. We've got that for light, and we've got this for light. So I'm going to give this one to Gloomhaven. I think this is a little bit more, expressive, and I think it's I think I like it a little bit better. You like this one? All right. Last one is fire. This one's okay. Eldamon's is very similar, but I think I like the icon better. Yeah, I do. And then Gloomhaven's is almost identical, but I'm going to give that one to Eldamon. Now, of course, realize that, how does that going to look, how's it going to look on a page when it's like a little tiny thing? There's a little bit more detail in these icons that may not, show up as well when you're looking at it from a distance. So there's something to be said about that. These are at least kind of somewhat visible even at a distance, but okay. Anyways. Satira thinks Gloomhaven wins for fire. Okay. So you know what? I'm going to do a generic poll just based off of the ones that we looked at. What style of elemental icon did you prefer the most? Your options are Gloomhaven, Eldamon, and Fabula Ultima. Now this is a Fabula Ultima stream, but don't let that don't let that dissuade you. Actually, Lugs, as you were saying, we are actually giving away a copy of the Techno Fantasy Atlas. This is the book that covers your kind of modern day quasi sci-fi JRPG Final Fantasy VII style. And we're going to be giving a copy of this away. And of course, this is signed by Emmanuel Galetto, the author of the book. And it includes a PDF. And if you're interested in that, we did do a stream about high fantasy. If you want to win it, type /join. Okay. All right, moving on. Back to Badger. So real quickly here. Yep, you're exactly right, Lugs. There's three atlases. There's high fantasy, which is, dragons and knights and shining castles and villainous villains. There's techno fantasy, right? Like, evil corporation that is going to mine the earth and whatever. And then natural fantasy, which is what we're covering today. They aren't settings. They're not campaign settings the way that, D&D campaign settings are. They are more like suggestions to help you build your games. Ultimately, all Fabula Ultima campaigns are custom built. Tabletop Nerd Josh, it is !join, not /join. !join. So, right there. There you go. Perfect. High fantasy, Dragon Quest, or Final Fantasy 1 or 4. Techno fantasy, Final Fantasy 7. Natural fantasy, Secret of Mana. Perfect. All right, so then, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I vibe so much with this game. I mean, this is not, this is the way I like to do gaming. Right off the bat, boom, right off the rip. Possible questions for the group, This is classic, this is classic sharing the collaborative narrative nature of it, right? It hides an incredible secret. What is it? Who knows about it? What's its price? The entrance to the temple is easy to find, but the inner sanctum is well protected. How do you access it? What prevents you from reaching it, right? I think questions are at the heart of what makes a good RPG game, because I like the group figuring out the answers together. And then here are some typical features. And the typical ancient shrine. Remember, this is all about a generic location. Should include at least some of the following features. Creatures or spells to test those who enter. An ancient evil sealed inside. An artifact belonging to a hero of the past. Link. A legendary beast of great wisdom. And it talks about where it would be located, the villain's plans, how would they reach it. Here are some story hooks. If you're going to bring the Badger Temple into play, the GM may use the following points to enrich the story by introducing artifacts, villains, discoveries, rewards. By the way, these are all actual game mechanics. Discoveries are part of the game mechanic. They're part of the travel mechanic. Rewards are, the treasure and stuff that you would give out to the players as they beat monsters and overcome challenges. Villains with a capital V are the villains of the campaign that use the Ultima point rules. Artifacts, again, a mechanically defined piece of the game system. Here are just some examples of trials that you can put in. The Hall of Despair, the Light and Darkness challenge, the Dark Vines, the Snake Spirit that you must overcome. And you don't have to use all of these. You don't have to use any of these. But these are just suggestions about how you can make a cool ancient temple. And if the group suddenly needs an ancient temple or ancient shrine, you can just reach in the book, pull this out, and drop it in the campaign. Or you could do a lot worse than just like preceding your campaign with like all 10 of these locations and just going, okay, well, these are going to come up at some point. These are just really, 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 really good. And they're very useful. And this is exactly what I want out of campaign supplements, FYI. I don't want endless, pre-prescribed lore, essentially a history book of something that already, doesn't exist, and your campaign has to be like this. Your campaign has to be like that. I love books and ideas and settings that are tools for my toolbox, tools for my GM toolbox. That's what I want. So here we have the Sleepy Hamlet. Again, archetypal locations for a natural fantasy. I mean, this looks straight out of like a Super Nintendo JRPG to me. And again, we have this sort of at a glance, at a very brief glance. In fact, I would argue that if you're a good enough dungeon master, or game master, especially if you're familiar with Fabula Ultima, that you probably could run an entire session or two off of just this this at a glance screen. But here's some more detail for you. Features, where's it at? How does the villains interact with it? What are some story hooks that you can use? Here are some locations within the location. The High Hill Road and the blacksmith shop and the inn and the Whispering Manor and Dimitri and the Dark Secret and a missing friend, Ruby and Fang, and right, all these places you could bring into it. What else do we have? The Haunted Island. We've got the Eternal Forest. We've got the Eerie Village. Dark Depth. Notice that it's a little bit different here, right? The elements are a little bit different. Earth and darkness and poison. And, I mean, just, again, awesome, incredible, indulgent art. Love it. Love the design. I love the layout. It looks even better when you've got it in a double spread. This is like what it looks like when you've got the book open at the page. You've got your left and your right pages. You have your gutter. You got the world location. Lots of space. It's very easy to read. We have the Central City. A remote ruin. That looks cool. That's a cool piece of art. The Golden City. The Sunny Bay for your beach episode, of course. Themes: time spent together, childhood memory, dreams of adventure, mysterious horizons. The Barren Wastes. Another cool piece of art. All right, I'm ending the poll. 50% of you said it is Eldamon that had the best icons, elemental icons. So it wasn't like a blowout, but 50% is 50%. So Fabula Ultima got 30% and Gloomhaven got 20%. The Freezing Mountain. And again, just like, I mean, all of these are just drag and drop adventure locations. You can mix and match them. You can use what you want. You don't have to use what you want. You can use some of it. You can use none of it. It's just so great for low prep, no prep play. It's just a great resource. And it's everything that I want. From, having something that's quick and at a glance, I can just go, okay, let me take a look here. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Oh, so a landslide. Perfect. Yeah, okay, you guys are going on vertical peak, and here's a landslide. Oh, the earth begins to tumble and collapse and fall. And like, what do you do? And everyone's like, oh, I'll use a ritual, and I'll speak to the elemental spirits, and I'll calm this, mountain. It's like, okay, cool. Right, we're having a cool moment. That's all we want in RPGs, right? It's cool. It's cool moments. So this next talks about ways to build conflicts in your natural fantasy game and how they might be different from other games. It talks about the difference between ignorance and fear, some of the themes that you may want to play on in the game. Mistakes of the past, hopes of the present, the idea of things having very long-term consequences, artifacts that maybe had unforeseen catastrophic effects, millennia-old progenies that have sort of continued to pay a price over the course of thousands of years. The price of peace. The idea that natural fantasy must have a bucolic aesthetic and deal with small, peaceful villages is superficial, to say the least. A large number of these stories take a different twist, highlighting the difficulties in human relationships. Sometimes they are just the inner conflicts of a village or family, but tales of violence and oppression between neighboring nations are equally common. Traditions are important and were probably created for a good reason, but that may not be the case any longer. So, it's not just about everybody's peaceful and we all get along. Sometimes, there's peace comes at a high price. The importance of that we have to find ways to communicate between people that may not share a same language, between strange elemental spirits and the voice of the forest. And so this idea that just even communicating and finding a common way to communicate could be a challenge in natural fantasy. A cruel curiosity. A lack of knowledge might spark conflict, but seeking knowledge can become its own form of danger. This gets back to the Jurassic Park Ian Malcolm quote, which was so well put in chat earlier. The idea that gaining knowledge can sometimes be dangerous in its own respect, especially if you don't have the wisdom and the respect that comes with that knowledge. Talking about the role of beasts and monsters in a natural fantasy game. It's not as easy as just saying these are the bad guys as it might be in other games. Finally, all tense situations and conflict scenes in a natural fantasy campaign should have a bitter or melancholic aftertaste, which highlights the torment of the antagonist, the bonds between the heroes and those who are in danger, or reiterates how the PCs are facing and paying the price of errors that were committed by the people of the past, right? So not saying that you shouldn't be all like high-fiving each other. You should still celebrate your wins. But, there's a bittersweetness to victory here. Here, to defeat the wrathful ice spirits, the Alderman's daughter decided to wield an ancient relic with the power to destroy souls. She, too, is going to forfeit her own, but the clan will survive. This idea of, hey, we won, but, this other character, this other NPC that we liked gave up her life, or, gave up her own soul, or the idea that, victory comes at a price. Magic and the role of magic and rituals. So for those of you who aren't aware, Fabula Ultima has kind of basically two magic systems that are kind of coexisting. They both run off of MP, which does not stand for mana points, although you could easily call it that. It stands for mind points, but it's because it represents more than just magic, but it's called MP so that you can forget about that and just call it MP. You have your combat spells, fire spell, Ignis, that does, 40 damage or 30 damage. But you also have rituals, which are a free form way to just sort of come up with an idea, work with your GM, and use your magic in a very soft way. So Fabula Ultima has both a very hard magic system for use in like combat or conflicts, where it's just like, hey, you spend this much MP, target 3 characters. They each take 20 fire damage. I'm going to make my attack against them. If I hit, they take 20 fire damage, and we move on, right? It's very hard, very defined, very mechanical, very game-like. But then the ritual system is very soft. It's I have an elemental ritualism ability. I'm going to take a moment. My hands are going to sink into the earth, grabbing at the freshly tilled soil. I'm going to reach out to the spirits of nature. I'm going to try to communicate through root, rock, and stem, and learn, it's a very much more, wishy-washy, kind of makes some stuff up, but ultimately is going to result in you and your GM, doing maybe a little bit of a negotiation to figure out magic as a negotiation, as a way to figure out what should be the DC of this, or the DL of this is what's called in this game. How many clock segments should it take to fill up if it does? What should be the mana cost involved with it? And what ultimately would be the effect of it? So again, magic, important here. Magic represents the delicate relationship between humanity, the ecosystem, and the mystery of life. It's important to ask, what is the source of the magical powers wielded by the characters, and how such abilities might alter the balance. The everything as a soul pillar from the core rulebook comes into its highest level of expression in natural fantasy. Magic is alive, often incarnate as a local spirit or presence, and reacts according to its own will and personality, right? So magic isn't just some like abstract force or concept. Magic might be, to quote Pocahontas, right? Where, but I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. So, it's not just, I use water magic. It might literally be the spirits of the river, and those could be personified. They could have their own personality. They could have their own will. Divinity isn't something far away and limited to specific moments of prayer. It's close every day, omnipresent, but also extraordinary, sentient, and unpredictable. It's part of everything and everyone. So this is very much, Jake says, there's even a class for you to paint with all the colors of the wind. Excellent. So just this idea that, right, the spirit realm is very close. It's kind of almost similar to Legend of the Five Rings, right? The idea that the kami, the elemental kami, are in everything, and they're all around you, and they're in you, just as they are in the rock and the town wall and the river and the bridge. They're in you. Following these premises, rituals become a dialogue with the forces of nature and require self-discipline, empathy, and preparation. And they are often the exclusive prerogative of a single member of the group trained in disciplines, which these are basically powers that you can take throughout the course of the game. Things like elementalism and spiritism let you use rituals to do certain types of effects. So again, talking about this is that. But this is the idea of magic as control. In natural fantasy worlds, magic is an allegory of life itself. Hey, Dr. Metropolis, thank you for another $3. Dr. Metropolis.
The Metropolis tip $3. Usually not one to get personal, but the themes in this atlas resonate deeply with me. There's a melancholy in natural beauty and loss. Not sad, but a pit in your stomach you can't shake. This game treats these themes with a maturity that's often missing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I mentioned before that, my dad is going through the end of his life, and trying to do it, with as much dignity and well-being as he can manage, and we can try to grant for him, and doing what we can. I'm reminded of last year. Obviously, I had a big fire, but before that, we have like a small bush in front of our house, and I saw that a pair of robins had made a nest in the bush, and they had a hatch of eggs, and we kind of basically got to see these birds flying in, and we had a bird feeder, so we kind of felt like we were co-parents, keeping the robins well fed. And then the babies were born, and we could see them inside the nest. They were little screaming things, and eventually they became fledglings, and they left the nest, and of course birds leave the nest. Nests aren't where birds live; they're just incubators, and then they live in the trees. And one day I was coming home, so I felt a certain connection to them. And one day I was coming home, and with my dogs from a walk, and I saw that a hawk, a Cooper's hawk, had grabbed one of the baby robins, probably from a branch or the tree or whatever, and it had it in its talons. It was probably suffocating, and it might have already been dead. I don't know. And I remember being really mad, and I ran up, and I don't know if I could have caught the bird, but the bird probably would have just flown away anyways. But I stopped because I realized that bird is probably hunting for its chicks. And, if I save that bird, I'm condemning, these hawks, these baby hawks, to starvation. And it's just the idea that I was like, this hawk doesn't have a choice. This hawk can't be a vegetarian, and I said, hell, I'm not even a vegetarian. I said, so how can I, judge this creature? It was like I know this is kind of a weird story, but it was just a very weird moment for me. And just, I felt this very strong kinship. And then it was kind of like letting, even though, again, I don't think I could have stopped the bird from flying away with the baby chick. I almost felt like me, willingly sacrificing my own child, because of the circle of life. It was very strange. It was, and then as I started to understand the balance of nature, my house burned down. So no, my house didn't burn down, but my garage did. So the circle of nature came full circle. Anyways, so this is just the idea that magic can become a force of perversion and evil if you use it to exert control over these natural processes. And finally, we have to spend a few words on the most common variation of these concepts: deicide and fear of death. Deicide. It might seem, and of course, one of the jokes that we always have is it's not a JRPG unless it ends with you fighting God in space, right? Deicide. It might seem strange to so directly discuss the subject of killing a god, since Fabula Ultima draws its inspiration from a long video game tradition where the final opponent is often a godlike entity with almost unlimited divine powers. However, in the natural fantasy genre, this dynamic is often turned upside down. The destruction of a god isn't a rightful act of rebellion against a destiny that someone else already wrote, but rather a violent, ignorant, and selfish act, showing a lack of empathy towards the spiritual world, driven by fear or greed. And so in this game, right, the gods, the spirits, the power, to disrupt that and to kill that is actually more of a villainous thing than a heroic thing. Fear of death. One of the finest examples of the desire to control magic in nature is, without any shadow of a doubt, the quest for immortality, which often drives the actions of the main antagonist or is the foundation of one or more mysteries or threats. This endeavor is as futile as it is reckless. Denying the reality of death or attempting to trick it and push it away pollutes the cycle of life, causing spiritual stagnation and unleashing the world of calamity that will snuff out future generations. So long story short, if you really want to come up with the ultimate natural fantasy villain, you just have somebody who maybe is otherwise very well-meaning, but they're seeking immortality because of their fear of death. And maybe they even rationalize it, right? I'm so close, I can another 100 years or another 200 years and I could finally cure, the plague and we would never suffer from this again or whatever. So they're doing it in a very righteous manner, but in trying to overcome their mortality, right? They're sort of, breaking the natural cycle. And then in order to achieve immortality, they have to kill a god, right? They kill some spirit. And when they say god, right, I'm thinking like that big weird spirit thing from Princess Mononoke. Exactly, Ben. Princess Mononoke vibes. That is what it is. It's like a big pig or something. It's been a long time since I've seen Princess Mononoke. And there you go. You've got like a picture textbook perfect natural fantasy villain. So I got a section here. I'm just going to skip through this here, but it just talks about technology, and its role in natural fantasy. It does say, contrary to what one might think, technology remains a core element of natural fantasy campaigns, but it might assume a very different role depending on its function. The idea that, technology can be a way of integrating and preserving, and even, cohabitating with nature. And someone mentioned earlier, solar punk, right? All right, so this is definitely something we wanted to roll here. So the role of the artisan. The artisan is a very important figure in natural fantasy settings, and their social role can be described as technical, spiritual, or a mix. In one sense, the artisan has the knowledge and abilities to shape matter and create something new. In another role, they are spiritual. They have the gift to mediate between spirits and energies that inhabit matter. These transformative roles are inextricably intertwined, but give artisans focus more on one than the other. Given their importance, the following pages present an updated version of the original rules for materials and forging, originally introduced with the 2022 Winter Holiday Bonus, a Christmas gift from Edgar, which was a free giveaway pamphlet that had some crafting rules. But this is an updated version that is now in full official print for the first time. This optional rule is especially fitting for natural fantasy stories. It has 4 goals. Define more precise value guidelines for the value of materials than provided in the core rulebook. Extend the use of gathered materials to the creation of equipment instead of limiting it to selling, funding projects, or reducing the mind point of rituals. Yes, I love a good crafting system. Provide rules for our characters who want to forge weapons, armor, shields, and accessories. The project rules weren't meant for this, and they are quite unwieldy for blacksmiths, weaponsmiths, and so on. Allow game masters to offer forging materials instead of complete items when giving rewards, not only saving time and energy better spent on designing adversaries and important items, but providing a way to reward the players even when the narrative situation doesn't lend itself to classic rewards such as rare items, inventory points, or money. AKA, you want to reward your players, but if they're off doing like a wilderness adventure, it might be weird for them to find you find the perfect rare magic item spear. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. But if they find some rare true silver ore, right, which makes sense, you're traveling through the wilderness, you're traveling through the mountains or the hills, the player knows, okay, cool, I can gather that. It's a reward because later on I can use that to create a mithril lance. And it's like, that's a cool moment. The core rulebook already suggests that game masters include non-equipment items amongst rewards. Forging materials follow the same rules and should be considered part of a session's rewards. Each copy of a given material is a single-use item and has a value between 500 and 3,000 zenit. So this is just getting into the nuts and bolts of the game, making sure that you give the proper reward. The Game Master is free to give materials any name and value or use this table from page 78 to randomly generate them. The important thing to remember is that each material has to quite clearly inspire one or more possible uses, right? So you want it to be very clear what you would use this material for. Purchasing materials. You can also purchase them by spending an amount of zenit equal to its value. When it comes to projects, this abstracts the process, but the group might want to purchase specific materials and keep them on hand for future use. The Game Master has final say on what materials can be bought in any given area. Hey, Need Games. Well, hey, what's up? Ciao, guys. Thanks for the deep dive in our new Atlas. Hey, yeah, awesome. We're excited. We're going through it. We're crushing it. You can also potentially sell materials as well. Just a little sidebar here about, again, talking about the process of death and rebirth in natural fantasy. Not to be, assholes who go around slaughtering herds of buffalo in order to harness skins, right? It's still about being integrated with nature, right? This optional rule makes it possible to spend materials to create new accessories, armor, shields, and weapons designed by the players as long as they meet one of the following conditions. The group has access to an NPC artisan capable of creating the required item. For example, a blacksmith for armor or a tailor for a dress. Or you have access to an artifact or other magical or technological device that can synthesize or transform objects. Or the group has at least one player character with a tinkerer class or an identity that ties into a profession relevant to the item they want to create. The game master has final say. It usually requires at least a single rest. And keep in mind, there is no limit to the number of items the group can forge in the same rest. First, the group prepares a draft of the item they wish to create using the rules in the core rulebook. The group indicates which materials they will provide for forging. Their total value must be equal to or higher than the cost of the item. The game master decides whether the item has costs appropriate to its effects and whether the materials are fit to forge them. The game master proposes any changes, go back to step one. So it's kind of a collaborative approach, right? You're like, okay, we want to add in these blah, blah, blah gems. And the game master will be like, okay, well, how about it does this instead of what you want it to do? And the players are like, yeah, that's pretty cool. We'll go with that. You're right. It's kind of like a back and forth. You're basically designing a magical item with your players using the sort of preconceived notions of what these materials mean to sort of inspire you. It's not a hard, it's not like a hard system where it's like, this material does this specific thing. It's more of like themes and ideas and using that to guide the process. Since the design and approval process for each item might require a fairly long conversation, it's often a good idea to take care of this during the time between sessions. Something that I don't think enough games talk about. I know Ben is in chat, and Ben is sort of a master of using the time between sessions to take care of certain game actions. There was a long and storied history of using that time between sessions to get things done. And I think nowadays people like, okay, the session's over at 10 o'clock, and they're like, I'm not interacting or thinking about this game until next week. And I feel like that is, unfortunate. Anyways, so the group wants to use the Titan Carapace to craft a heavy weapon with the same profile as the Beowulf, which is an item from the core rulebook. But this one's capable of dealing air damage. The total cost is 660 Zenit, well within the limits of the 720 Zenit derived from the group's level of 12. The game master has no objectives, so the item can be crafted by expending the material and paying 66 Zenit to a weaponsmith. The Brynhild will be ready in a few hours. And then there's some information about how this interacts with some of the existing rules, custom weapons, technospheres, yada, yada, yada. And here is some random material generators. So D10 rolls from things from an animal nature, mammals, mollusks, reptiles, fungal, incorporeal, liquid, plant, mineral, artificial. And then here are some things like, for example, maybe, you build up a nomenclature. Oh, you've discovered, right, astral, you've discovered astral algae. I mean, that totally sounds like something you would totally see in a JRPG, right? Astral algae, and that's related to the dark element. So probably not something you're going to want to use to create a staff of healing, right? But it's pretty cool, and you can see where that's going. Or it's like, oh, cool, you have found, amber, amber seashells, or an amber shell, or an amber egg, and an amber fang, and it's like, cool, that is related to the electricity, to the bolt damage type, and so you can imagine using that for that purposes. So we got all the different elemental energy types here: air, bolt, dark, earth, fire, right, light, poison, all these other themes. And then we also have just descriptors, right? Something that might be related to elastic, or oily, might be related to agility and precision. Something that's heavy or bloated or serrated might be related to damage. Something that's holy or hardened could be related to protection, right? So, if you find a hardened amber a hardened amber shell, you kind of get some idea of what you might use that for. And again, it's partly a creativity exercise, And then we've got some lists of rare items. I'm not going to go through all these, but needless to say, they all always have really awesome, cool 16 by 16 pixel art. They have information. They do cool things. It's just cool examples of just basically more cool items that you can add into your game. Cool, fun things that they can find. Yes, there's totally a ladle. It even improves your made with love skill, which is for the gourmet class. There's the giant fork. Oh yeah. Now you might be saying here, Derek, don't you hate stuff like this? And the answer is no, because I don't hate stupid things. What I hate is when stupid things are thrown into environments or things or places where they don't make any sense. This is a JRPG. I grew up playing, characters like Realm, right? Who can, and Strago and, people who can and Gao, right? People who can Gao leaps onto a monster and then comes back a fight later and now can use that monster's technique. Realm paints monsters and they become alive and then they fight for you. This is just part of the genre. And so for me, this is fine because this is what this is trying to be. Anyways, so we got a long list of rare items and accessories and armor and weapons and even artifacts. Artifacts aren't like normal magic items. They kind of just do really cool, powerful things. They don't really necessarily have game mechanics. They more have sort of like narrative effects on the game. And again, all of these are more just like inspiration porn, right? Like it's just like good stuff for you to read and go, that looks cool. I want to put this in my campaign. I want to build my whole campaign around it. Right. Marks, that's a great example. When you're playing some of the old JRPGs, it's not an item you could equip. It's in that key items part of your inventory, right? It's like the loot or the rod from Final Fantasy 1, right? It doesn't have an attack power. It doesn't have a damage. It's just something that does something at a very key critical moment in the campaign. And they always give you, and again, these are just to inspire you as a GM to something that you might want to drop in your campaign. You could end up just taking one of these and just building a whole campaign off of it potentially. And it's all just and again, none of it is like written in this like prescribed lore. It must be this way. It's all done in a very like open, inspired, use what you want, throw out what you don't way, and that's what makes it so cool. All right. All right. So, new classes. Our protagonists. So, we've got some custom weapons. We're not going to cover this because we've covered custom weapons before. And we've covered quirks before in previous videos. So I'm going to cut ahead to camp activities, and then we're going to talk about new classes, new heroic skills, and then we're going to finish off by looking at one of the villains from the game. So, camp activities. This is an optional rule designed to give greater spotlight to resting scenes and provide more options rather than just increasing or modifying bonds. In the current game, when you enter a rest scene, it's usually an opportunity for the players to, talk in character or express ideas a little bit and increase or change bonds is what you typically do in a resting scene.
Keegan tipped $10.
Hey, thank you, Keegan.
Would love for you to get Emanuele on a stream.
Emanuele. Yeah, that'd be amazing. And of course, Emmanuel is a member of the Knights of the Last Call Patreon, so easier said, or easier said and done. So I don't think it would take too much to give up. But he's a very busy person, and especially since he's got a bestiary on the way and a new book to print. So this gives your characters more things to do when you get to camp. If you use this optional rule, each player character gains access to 2 different camp activities chosen during character creation from the list in the following pages. Make sure to avoid redundant camp activities with the same group, and choose activities that fit your character's concept and identity. Remember, only $34 more to try to get Mr. Galato on the stream. Thank you, Keegan. Thank you, Keegan. When each player characters play a resting scene, be it inside of a settlement or the wilderness, each player character who takes part in it may perform one of the camp activities they have access to, describing it and applying its benefits to the chosen target. It should be noted that each character may choose how to employ the resting scene, independently from everyone else. Well, hot dang.
Lollipop Candy tipped $44. Rooster Emma hype. Let's go.
All right. Well, there we go. Thank you, Lollipop, for finishing off. Thank you, everybody, for quickly filling up that tip jar. That is awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I will. To be clear, he has offered sort of before. I mean, he obviously has a very busy schedule. This month we've got a couple people that we're having on. We're having Tundalus on this week. We're having Level 2 Janitor on next week to talk about their independent games. So maybe in the next couple weeks or next month or so, if he can get some time, Manuel could come on. We could talk about. I'd love to talk to him about designing monsters, how he's going that through the bestiary process, because he's in the middle of writing that right now. And I think that's the thing I personally struggle with the most with Fabula Ultima is how to create cool, not just villains, but also to create, good monsters that are fun to use, that provide a good counterpoint to the players and aren't just a slog to go through. Lucas says, I love camp activities. All my homies love camp activities. Had using it for the playtest, and it's such a fun way for characters to prompt each other for roleplay, which is my table's focus. And I think I think Luca it's an important point. I just want to take a side note here is I like some amount of fluffy bullshit time at my tables. I prefer it to be related to mechanics though. But for me, there's a time and a place. And what I like about resting scenes is that they provide, as Luca was saying, it's a great prompt to expressly engage with this one element of role playing. You can discuss your character. You can kind of give some thoughts into their ideas or feelings. And then once we move out of the camp phase, we can kind of get back to, the regular part of the game. So whether they perform a camp activity or not, characters may still use the resting scene to adjust their bonds. Keeping track of the benefits. Many camp activities provide a benefit that can only be used once before the next rest. So make sure you easily remember which character have access to specific benefits. You could use tokens or counters or other small objects that express the personality of if we did this at my table and we were playing a person, everyone who had a camp activity would totally have little tokens that they could give to somebody as part of that camp activity. And I would love it because I love doing that kind of stuff. I love tokens and objects and physical doodads. And I don't care if it's board gamey, it's better than anything else. Monster design, how to make it faster and satisfying is definitely something I like to be talking about. Yes, Z, we'll definitely talk about that. And Robert, yes, I am aware of the Fultimator. And for sure, I'm absolutely aware of that. Yes, I have seen that. But still, to go to the source and talk about that. And I haven't spent as much time lately on the Need Game or the Rooster Discord. I am a member. But yeah, absolutely. That's cool that it's kind of almost like a public outsource point at this part. Pepper says, when I was running FabU, my biggest issue was trying to think of fun gimmicks since I don't have a lot of JRPG knowledge. Definitely looking forward to the bestiary. Yes. And starting from a certain level, monsters have to be overpowered. Well, not to go off on a tangent here, but one of the nice things about Fabula Ultima is you don't really have to worry too much, because if you create a broken monster, I mean, yes, you could always roll it back, but worst case scenario, right, is the group all fails and they all die, but you don't die unless you want to die. So they all just surrender. And so you can't actually TPK your group, even if you somehow create some crazy, absurd monster. In fact, if a bunch of players all take the surrender option, they're just going to earn a bunch of Fabula points. So in a way, it's kind of like a way of power leveling the group in a weird way. So anyways, basic stuff. And also I'm sure my group would do this, just like with the items. And the idea is that there's an opportunity for groups to customize and create your own items. I'm sure we would probably end up creating some of our own camp activities, or even throughout the course of the campaign, you might start with 2 camp activities, but I could totally imagine a player earning or acquiring diegetically or as part of a quest, a new camp activity that gave them access. That would be such a cool element of progression, such a fun element to tie your character's mechanical interactions to things that they did in the campaign, which is why I love rewards and stuff like that. But you can see here, you could cartography, spend some time with the map, and once before you make your next rest, when you make a travel roll, you could re-roll the dice results. So if you roll something shitty, you can re-roll it and try to get something better because you're keeping track of the maps. My torchbearer crew is like, yes, we understand the value of cartography now. Camp fort, so combat lesson. Once before the next, you have to choose an ally. Can't choose yourself. After making an accuracy check or a magic check for an offensive spell, you can add +4 bonus to the result of the check. So one time +4 bonus, which is really powerful, which is really cool. So this is obviously a buff, but what's cool is it adds a bit of a strategic element to the game, right? If you're resting before going into a big combat and battle, you might not take the cartography lesson, right? You might give the combat lesson and you might do some time. And of course, describe to live. I want to hear, okay, what are you guys doing? What does your combat lesson take the place of? I don't necessarily want it to take 30 minutes for you to describe it, but I want you to say more than just combat lesson and then hand them a token. Daydream, double potion, exploration, gathering, massage, midnight oil, pep talk, right? Some of this stuff is so fun. Sleep soundly. Once before the next rest, you may perform an additional action on your turn during a conflict scene. It has to be used to perform the equipment, hinder, or inventory action. How awesome, That's so cool. There we go. Look at that. You might create new camp activities for your characters. If you do so, try to keep them on the same power level as these. Then again, if your group has a passion for fantasy cooking, you might change this rule so that each activity is instead a special dish created by your character and always has one ally as the target. Sharing is caring. That's cool. I could even see sort of, introducing some magical elements to this, right? Where maybe, a white mage character is sort of blessing a character or giving them some sort of protective ritual, right? Kind of thing, but structuring it as a camp activity. So they always do this where they give you examples of how you might combine different classes to create a starting character. And they, usually include some of the classes from the new book. So for example, the flutist monk is 3 levels of Invoker, which is a new class, plus 2 levels of Spiritist. The Frontier Researcher is 1 level of Lore Master and 2 levels of Sharpshooter from the core book, and 2 levels of Merchant. They're equipped with twin pocket pistols. Here's the Grinning Veteran. They have 3 levels of Gourmet, 1 level of Guardian, and 1 level of Weapon Master. I can't help but feel like this is kind of the... what's that character's name from Dungeon Meshi? Setsa, whatever, the dwarf. I feel like this is what they were trying to go with here. Senshi, thank you. Keeper of the Sacred Tree, 3 levels of Arcanist, 2 levels of Invoker. The Lotus Duelist has 2 levels of Elementalist, 2 levels of Floralist, and 1 level of Weapon Master. The Shy Apothecary, 1 level of Merchant, 4 levels of Tinker. So these are just, for people who just want to get into it and you're like, I don't know what to build. Here you go. Boom. Take one of these. Oh, I like this. Yeah, Troublemaker Rogue. That sounds like me. Cool. I'm going to include it. Oh, I want to be a Twilight Witch. That sounds cool. I'll grab that. All right. So this is an example of where everybody's somewhat of a gourmet and everybody has a different cooking element. All right. So we're going to get into the classes here and we'll probably spend, 30 minutes going through these. So the Floralist, also the Bloom Blade, the Gardener, the Herbalist. There is no rose without thorns. Spiritual energy flows strongly within plants thanks to their direct connection to our earth. Growing from this encounter are Magiseeds, gifted with the unique ability to thrive on spiritual energy and blossom into a majestic yet ephemeral triumph of magic. Floralists can cultivate these strange seeds which grant a large variety of benefits and can be combined with all sorts of disciplines, magical and martial. So Smith is playing a kind of druidic-like creature. He's kind of based his race off of the Vera from Final Fantasy 14 and I guess Final Fantasy 12. I think they're in 12, right? Isn't Fran a Vera? Anyways, his character is like kind of a druid but can, relies on like the power of growing things and is sort of tapped into like the growing life spark of the universe. So he is a floralist amongst other things. Free benefits, you get +5 HP or +5 MP. I always love these classes that give you options. And then the way this works in Fabula Ultima, again, if you're not familiar, you can take up to 10 levels in a class. You can't take more than that. Once you've gotten to 10 levels in a class, you've mastered the class. You can't take any more levels in it. And you get to pick a new heroic skill. And then you have to start taking levels in some of your other classes. Once a class is mastered, it doesn't count against your limit of 3 classes. You can only have 3 non-mastered classes active at any one time. As you can see, each time you gain a level in Floralist, you get to pick 1 skill. Some skills, like Graft, are just, once you take it, you've got it. Verdant Sway is the same way. Tree of Life, Chloromancy, and Battle Gardening all have skill ranks or skill levels. So they can be taken multiple times. So as you can see here, if you wanted to take every single ability that the Floralist had, you would have to spend 1, 2, 3 on Battle Gardening, 10 on Chloromancy, that's 13, another one on Graft, 14, another one on Verdant Sway, 15, and then 5 on Tree of Life. So that's 20 levels worth of skills to get all of them. You can never get all of them. You can only get 10. So every choice, every time you make a character in Fabula Ultima, it's a tough choice because you might go, wow, I want to have a character. I want to have all the Chloromancy spells. You're like, okay, well, you could do that, but then you won't have any other powers. So let's see what they get. Well, for starters, I think we need to talk about Chloromancy. This is the main thing that they do here. So each time you acquire this skill, you discover a new type of Magiseed from the list found in the next pages. This is sort of like their version of spells. During a conflict, it's like a combat or an encounter, if there are no Magiseeds in your garden, you may use an action and spend 20 MP to plant a seed of a type that you have already discovered. The rules for gardens and Magiseed growth can be found in the next pages. So the way that the Floralist works is actually, it's a pretty complicated class. Basically, you kind of have to think in advance because when you plant your seed in your sort of spiritual mystical garden, it will start to grow and it will give you certain benefits as it continues to grow. But those benefits change over time. So you kind of have to think ahead about whether or not what benefit you might need this round or next round versus in 3 rounds. So they can grow these different types of flowers, and the different types of flowers grant different types of effects. So before we take a look at any of these other skills, let's go take a look at what Magiseeds you can have. Now, to be clear, the garden is abstract. It could be a pot of earth that you carry around with you on your backpack. It could be a, spiritual green energy field that coalesces and gathers around your feet. Maybe it's anytime you're, the ground at your feet, green grass sprouts up and plants start growing. It's an abstract concept. The most important thing to remember is that your garden can only have 1 Magiseed planted at a time. And at the end of every scene, anything growing in your garden is removed. So you don't get to start with something growing in your garden, right? It has to be, basically you start every conflict scene or every scene with it empty. Okay. So when you acquire the Chloromancy skill the first time, you get a growth clock, which is present only during conflict scenes and represents the cycle of life in your garden. Your growth clock is a 4-segment clock and it begins every scene empty. At the end of the turn, if a Magiseed is present in your garden, so during your turn, if you plant a seed in your garden, you then fill in one of the sections of 4 of the growth clock. Then, if there is still a Magiseed in your garden, and that Magiseed has an end of turn effect, it applies. When you fill in the 4th section of your growth clock, so basically at the end of your turn, you'll fill in a section. If that fills in the 4th section of your clock, you remove the Magiseed and erase all the sections of your growth clock. The flower has done growing and the cycle of life returns, right? So now you can plant a new seed because now your garden is empty. Sections of your growth clock may not be filled or erased in any way other than described above, or through Brambleheart and Green Thumbs, or through something that explicitly targets growth clocks. In other words, you can't use an action to try to hyper push up your flower. Magiseeds have passive effects, which means they always are on, or they could trigger at the end of a turn after your growth clock has increased. The effect of a Magiseed only happens while it's in your garden and depends on how many segments of your clock are filled. All right. So let's take a look here at the Arctic Narcissus. So basically, when you first plant it, just you. Hey, thank Duncan.
Duncan DT tips $3. Finally, the gardening minigame we all needed.
Thank you, Duncan. So if you took one level in Floralist and you picked up the Chloromancy skill, one of the things that you could pick up is the Arctic Narcissus seed. And now you have the ability to plant Arctic Narcissus seeds. When you plant it, just you, gain resistance to, this is a passive effect, you are resistant to earth and ice damage. And that's going to be for the turn that you plant it and the next turn. Then, right, because then at the end of the first turn, you're going to fill in the clock segment. Then at the end of your second turn, you're going to fill in the second clock segment. And now you and all your allies present on the scene are resistant to earth and ice damage. So you have to be very strategic with when you plant your flowers, because if you, for example, know that you're fighting a boss monster, maybe a frost dragon, and maybe they're on some sort of timer or clock, or maybe they're on some sort of countdown, if you plant this seed the round before they unleash their Arctic ice death, it's only going to help you out. You actually have to think about this in advance and plan it 2 rounds earlier, so that by the time your second turn comes around, the growth clock ticks to 2 and everybody has resistance to both earth and ice. So not a class for beginners, right? This isn't just like point and click, instant class, no cool global cooldown. You have to be very strategic about how you use these effects. So let's take a look at a couple other flowers that you can pick up. The Blazing Chrysanthemum. At the end of your turn, choose earth or fire. Until you use this effect again, or this magic seed is no longer in your garden, all damage dealt by you and every ally present on the scene becomes the chosen type, and its type cannot change, and it ignores resistances. So this one is a little bit simpler. You plant it, and then at the end of your turn, you fill in the first growth clock segment. It goes to 1. You choose earth or fire, and everybody's damage becomes fire or earth. So this could be very powerful if you're fighting a monster, let's say, that takes double damage from fire. Maybe that ice dragon that we talked about. So which one do you plant? You can't plant. You can only have one flower in your garden. Let's take a look. The Desert Dahlia is similar to the other, to the Arctic Narcissus, in that it resists air and fire. Here's another one, Golden Ginkgo. At the end of your turn, you and every ally you can see recover from dazed, enraged, and shaken. So remember, when you first plant it, your growth clock is at 0. And at the end of your first turn, you're going to tick the growth clock up to 1. And then you're going to cure everybody of dazed, enraged, and shaken, which is pretty sweet. But then the next turn, your growth clock will tick up to 2. And at the end of your turn, everyone will recover an amount of MP equal to 5 plus your skill ranks in Chloromancy. So it's a MP healer. And then it'll do that again, and then it'll finish growing, and now you can repeat. So, if you want the MP, you got to think about the timing and the structure. Here's one, the Grave that has a different effect at each growth clock segment. So this one's like maximum complexity, right? So not for the faint of heart. There's a bunch of different flowers, and of course, I'm sure you as a player could create a bunch of them, create your own. But in total, there's Jesus Christ. Let's see how many. Remember, the most ranks in Chloromancy you can take is 10, so you can only get 10 magic seeds. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There are 20 flowers. And even if you use your entire class just taking Chloromancy, you're only able to get 10. So tough choices. But let's see what else you could pick up. So you can pick up Battle Gardening. Great name. After you plant a Magiseed through the Chloromancy skill. So in other words, when your garden is empty and you're planting a new seed, and that takes your action, you may choose one option. You can immediately perform a free attack with an equipped weapon, or you can perform a spell action for free, casting a spell with a total MP cost equal to or lower than 5 plus your skill level times 5. You have to still pay the MP. So you can't cast a super powerful uber ultimate spell, but you can cast like a minor spell. Treat the high roll of your accuracy check or magic check as being equal to 0 when you determine the damage. So it's typical for free attacks. You treat the high roll as 0. But basically this lets you do a little bit of action economy enhancer. The turn where you're just planting your seed, maybe you're not getting a whole lot of benefit otherwise because you're just, what'd you do this turn? Planted my seed. Because that's the cool thing, by the way. Once your seed is planted, you get all those effects each round for free. You don't have to do anything. Once you've planted the seed, it keeps growing on its own. So, if you're like Aaron's character that he made is, I think, a floralist elementalist. So Aaron's plan is to like plant a seed, get a couple actions or get a couple rounds worth of free growing actions, but then use those other turns to cast spells and engage in combat. Battle gardening kind of lets you fight and do something even on a turn where you're planting your seed. Graft. So this is one where you just take it, you get it, and there's no skill levels to it. As long as there is a Magiseed in your garden and one or more sections of your growth clock are filled, you may use an action to remove that Magiseed from your garden. If you do, plant a different Magiseed among those you have discovered and keep the number of segments in your growth clock unchanged. So the strategic implications of graft are crazy, because what this means is we could get the early benefits of one flower and then graft into the later benefits of another flower if we need them. And so this would let us, for example, we could be growing the blazing chrysanthemum as an example. So we're growing the blazing chrysanthemum because we want to give everybody fire damage against this ice dragon. But then the GM telegraphs that next round, the ice dragon is going to breathe its fire, its frosty ice death. So what do? Well, our blazing chrysanthemum is growing. We can't rip it out of the ground. Once it's growing, it's growing. But with graft, we can take out the blazing chrysanthemum and drop in the Arctic narcissus. But it doesn't restart at 0. It starts at wherever our blazing chrysanthemum, which is like maybe at segment 2, which means all of our allies get resistance to earth and ice, which means we are set up to be protected from that blast from the frost dragon, even though we started off with the blazing chrysanthemum. So this kind of lets you cheat a little bit and kind of lets you hop between different flowers. The next one is Tree of Life, which we can take up to 5 times. Whenever you remove a Magiseed from your garden, you may choose one creature you can see. If that creature is in crisis, which means they're at half hit points or lower, they recover 5 plus skill level times 5 hit points. So basically, every time you remove a seed, which could be from graft, it could be because the flower finished growing, then you get to heal somebody that's low on hit points for free. No, it doesn't cost any MP. It's just for free. Right? The growing energy of your plant gives off healing vibes. And lastly, Verdant Sway. So this is another one where you have it or you don't have it. You gain the ability to perform rituals. Rituals are that sort of soft magic system I was talking about of the ritualism discipline. Additionally, you may use ritualism to create, animate, or control vegetation, pollen, spores, and toxins. So let me give you an example. All of the Magiseeds in this class are very combat oriented, right? Give you resistance to damage, heal hit points, right? Remove conditions, make an enemy shaken. What Verdant Sway allows us to do is to be like, Poison Ivy from Batman or that one girl from Sky High, right? Like this is where your character can go, we have to get to the top of, we have to get to the branches, and the floralist uses a ritual and the tree limbs, kind of come to life and bend down and, offer up the limbs, and you're able to step into it and sort of lift up the party up into the branches of the tree, or they're able to grow a vine lattice or ladder, to maybe cover the entrance to a cave or to function as a way to climb up out of danger. So this is where you can get into that sort of soft magic system. So not only Verdant Sway basically lets you do that sort of non-combat magic bullshit stuff, and it still uses MP, so it's still tied into the same system that you use for everything else. And of course, it has to be a negotiation between you and the GM. How difficult is this? How much magic points does this cost? But it gives you that ability to do all that other kind of prestidigitation, but not like 0th level. Like this is a ritual. You can like the ritual spells would let let's say an attacking army was coming to destroy a city. Like this is the type of thing where like if the ritual was like one of the mega rituals, you might like animate the forest, right? And create sort of a living wall of wood around a city or a settlement. It could be very big level stuff, Anyways, so here's the crazy thing is you're like, so I think this class is awesome. You might think I would hate this class, but I love this class. Number one, it's very appropriate for a JRPG. Number two, I love the they always give like these different titles named for it. Bloom Blade is called cool. But the third thing is this is compelling game mechanics. I think this is cool. I think this is exciting. I think this is difficult. And I like it. I think it's awesome. Also, shout out to this NPC for having vitiligo, just like me. Although my vitiligo is not as bad, but shout out. Shout out to the representation, to us pigmentless, patchy folks. I don't know that I've ever seen a character with vitiligo in art before, so. At least I'm assuming that's vitiligo. That's what it's supposed to be. So that's the Floralist. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of Gourmet because Gourmet is crazy. But Gourmet cooks stuff. They make all of these different little ingredients using their cooking skill. And they have to acquire ingredients. And then each ingredient has two tastes. So you might have an ingredient that is bitter and salty, or bitter and sour, or bitter and sweet. And as a result, that pair of tastes for the rest of the campaign has a certain effect. And it's unique to you. And you roll it randomly to determine what it does. And as a result, the Gourmet ends up coming up with these crazy, weird combination of strange abilities that no other character class can come close to, but it's a little bit random because of how you gain it. And long story short, the Gourmet has to use supplies that they gather throughout the course of adventuring or traveling or going to cities. And then they make little, tasty treats. And they pass them out to their allies and they eat them and they do things like, and you could also give them to enemies. You can recover hit points, MP, they can deal damage, so it might be like corn dog bomb or something. And it's a really weird, interesting class to say the least. And one of the cool things about it is you need to, you have to keep track of these ingredients that you have. And as you go through the game, and they get different abilities too. So they have these cooking. Whenever you rest inside of a settlement, it has to be inside of a settlement, you gain some ingredients equal to your skill level. You can take up to 10 plus skill level times 5 ingredients with you. So the more ranks in cooking you have, the more ingredients you can carry with you. And that's how you will, determine how you use your spell. So it's a very long duration resource. It's not like MP that quickly comes back. It's more of like a between cities and settlements when you're able to refill your pack. Now, there is an ability that you could pick up here called Traveling Cook, which is every time you travel, you gain skill level and Traveling Cook times 2 ingredients. In other words, I'm gathering mushrooms and, ooh, look at that. Fresh amber fresh amber figs. I'm going to put those in my backpack, right? So you find different ingredients as you're traveling. But remember, you only get 10 of these if you take all 10. So you can't get everything. By the way, as a reminder, type !join to enter the giveaway for a copy of Fabula Ultima techno fantasy. Unfortunately, natural fantasy is only available in PDF, just came out. And this copy is signed by the author, Emmanuel Galetto, and it will be yours. So type !join in chat. No, Dr. Waits, you did not join too late. I'm going to do it right at the end. So again, not going to go to all the details of it, but needless to say, it is pretty cool. You even get a cool, do they have it here? Hold on a sec. You even get a cool, you get a cool special sheet to track your different combinations and ingredients. So these are your bitter ingredients that you've gathered, right? And look at this sheet. This sheet is so fucking cool. So this is your cookbook, right? So these are your ingredients. You've got bitter ingredients, salty ingredients, sour ingredients, sweet ingredients, and umami ingredients. And then your different recipes are made of different combinations of all these different ingredients. So, you can make something out of a bitter ingredient and a bitter ingredient, and that's going to do X. And then if you have bitter and salty, it's going to do Y. And the thing is, you don't start the game with these all filled in. You don't. Like some of this you just discover through play. And it's almost like you're creating these new recipes to do these different game effects. Again, I love this. I think this is so fun. I think it's number one, a very compelling game mechanic. And number two, I think it's very appropriate for a JRPG, especially natural fantasy. And this is definitely Dungeon Meshi for sure. You need this ported to PF2. But I just love this sheet. I mean, come on. How cool is that? I just even love the way it's laid out, It's just it's so fun. It's just so fun and laid out. So fun. Okay. Okay, so the Invoker is a class that, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy Tactics, this is actually where I know the class mostly from. There might be some other, there's a class, who's the person who can do is it Strago from FF6? No, Strago's a blue mage. In Final Fantasy Tactics, the Invoker is what would be called a Geomancer. Okay, and the Geomancer is a class that functions in Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's kind of like a spellcaster, but their abilities are all elemental. But they depend on the type of terrain that they are in for their effect. So the way this works is your core thing here is called Invocation, where you can spend an action and 5 MP to perform an invocation, drawing energy from one of the well springs present on the scene. The number of skill levels you have determines what invocations you have access to. So a wellspring is basically the type of elemental energy present on the scene. So for example, if you were fighting up, remember those locations gave us examples of the type of elemental energy that might be present? So you could imagine that if our characters were fighting up on a mountaintop and there was, wind and blizzard winds swirling around us, we might say that an air wellspring was present in this scene. And that means that our Invoker or our Geomancer or our, whatever else I'll call them, Channeler or 5-Soul Master would gain access to the air invocations. And you get Blast. What is it here? Yes. Skill. If you have skill level 1, you get access to Blast. If you have skill level 2, you get Blast and Hex. And skill level 3 gives you access to all of them. So the cool thing about these are there isn't any to hit roll. The damage here isn't really great, but it's cheap because it's only 5 MP. And it's, as far as I could tell, it's automatic. So, that's pretty good. Now, the downside is you don't control when you have access to the air wellspring, right? The scene and the genes do, right? But being able to spend 5 MP to heal somebody for 30 HP is pretty good. Being able to spend 5 MP to do 20 damage air, automatic, no attack roll, is pretty good. So during each scene, your surroundings grant you 2 different well springs. The Game Master will tell you what they are. Remember to describe how the well springs manifest in the scene. So there's always 2. But that means as a character, this is a little bit more complicated of a class, because in one fight, you might have access to air and cold. In another fight, you might have access to fire and earth, right? And another class, you might have, I said ice, but water. Another fight, you might have access to lightning and water. Maybe it's a torrential downstorm, right? Torrential thunderstorm. Well, the GM says you have access to the lightning wellspring and the water wellspring. So this fight, you have access to these 8 abilities. But in a different fight, you might have access to a very completely different set of abilities. So, it requires some flexibility on your behalf. Now, of course, remember, this is Fabula Ultima. You never just have one class. You also have multiple classes, which is pretty cool. So let's take a look at what this class can do. For starters, we get to pick, once we pick it up, we get 5 HP or 5 MP as we choose. The core ability is Invocation, which lets us spend 5 MP to perform an invocation, drawing energy from the wellspring. If you have 3 ranks in this, you get access to all 4 invocation types. I don't know anyone who would take this class that wouldn't just take 3 ranks in invocation. It's a little weird that it's even an option, I suppose, but if you only wanted blast, I guess. But I feel like most people would probably almost always take 3 ranks in invocation. Maybe someone could point out to me why not, but we can have a linked invocation for up to 3 points. Whenever we perform one of those invocations, we could spend additional MP, and for every 10 MP we spend, we can target an additional creature. So this lets us go from targeting one creature to multiple creatures at an increased cost of mana. With Elemental Harmony, this gives us the ability to communicate with any monster or creature that has the elemental type. And if we restore a creature's hit points with an invocation or a spell, if an elemental is in the scene, we heal them for more hit points. Ripples. All right. This we can have up to 5 ranks in. After an enemy you can see loses hit points due to damage dealt by one of your allies, if that damage was increased by one of your hex invocations, in other words, if you buffed their damage, you may perform a free attack. That means you get to make an attack. Doesn't cost you anything. Doesn't take a turn. With a weapon you have equipped. The attack can only target that enemy and receives a bonus equal to the skill levels that you have in Ripples, equal to that accuracy check. If it is successful, all its damage becomes of the same type dealt by your ally. And all hex invocations present on the target end immediately after the attack has been resolved. If 2 or more enemies trigger this skill at the same time, you can perform a free attack against each of them in whichever order you prefer. So this is what we call like a wombo combo ability. This is one of those things where you and your party can build together to create these kind of like combination effects to really trigger off and do these really like powerful combat moves. This is one of those more what I would call advanced techniques. But basically, it allows you to set up, to buff your allies and then to cash in on that buff, or I should say debuff your enemies, and then cash in on that to do a super big potential free attack that also triggers additional damage types. Lastly, Wellspring Expansion. As long as you have a weapon that is arcane, bow, flail, sword, brawling, or thrown, your blast invocations deal extra damage. And the extra damage granted by your hex invocations is also increased. So if you want more damage, pick up this one. Other than that, pretty basic. But, again, realize that, if Earth is on the scene, we're going to be able to heal people. If water is on the scene, I'm sorry, is it just Earth? I thought there was another one. Sorry. If Earth and air are present on the scene, or air, we can heal people with our invocations. If they're not, none of these other things have the ability to heal people. So, we can't count on our invoker giving us the ability to set up heals. No skill that could cheat out Wellsprings even temporarily. None that I'm aware of, Marks. However, Marks, and people in chat who are more familiar with me than Fabula Ultima, if a scene was developing and maybe an elementalist, which is a spellcaster, who has access to the elementalism skill, which grants you the ability to do elemental rituals, maybe an elementalist could summon a swirling storm, right? Before almost like a storm from the X-Men, before a fight begins. And that could definitely change the wellspring, right? Present on the scene. And that would give you probably access to air and lightning. Air gives us that ability to heal. So yeah, I think that's possible. But yeah, so yes, I guess I would say yes. Is there specifically a skill? Probably not. But a ritual? Absolutely. Oh, okay. And great. Z has even better knowledge. So there's a heroic skill. Remember, when you get 10 levels in a class, you've mastered the class. You can't take any more levels in that class, but you do get access to a heroic skill. And heroic skills are kind of generic, but some heroic skills are specifically linked to certain classes. And Z is saying that there is a heroic skill that lets you pick one element that is always available to you, and you can change that at the beginning of the day. And lastly, there is the merchant. Now, I'm not going to go over everything about the merchant just because, we did 2 classes. We did Floralist and we did Invoker. But the merchant is a class that is kind of plays around with consumable items and inventory points. So they have their main thing here is to gain trade points. So again, this is kind of a class like Gourmet, where you're sort of tied to settlements. So when you rest in an area where commerce is possible, you get skill level, and you remember we can take up to 3 trade points, and we can never have more than skill level plus 3 trade points. During a non-conflict scene, so not a combat, not an intense encounter, we can spend 2 trade points to choose an option. We can create a material or rare item approved by the game master whose value in Zenith is equal to blah, blah, blah. Or we could create an NPC that lives nearby and explain their occupation and tell us how you met them. And so basically, this lets us kind of create quantum or virtual NPCs and equipment. However, there's some other things that they have. For example, if someone's down on inventory points, we can spend our trade points to help them cover the cost of the inventory points, aka coming from my private stock. Oh, you're out of potion? Here, have one from my private stock. You can also use your trade points to grant a bonus in order to examine something because you're a merchant. You've seen it out, you've heard of it, you've been around. So this just gives you different options on how to spend your treasure points. This lets you do a little bit more with potions or delicacies that you've created. So obviously, in order to do this, you need to be a class that creates potions or creates delicacies like the Gourmet. And lastly, real treasure. Once per session, when you help an NPC or a community defeat greed and corruption or improve their quality of life or coexist with other creatures, you get additional trade points because the real treasure is the friends we made along the way. Which grants you trade points because that's the real treasure. This is just a fun class to play around with this little meta resource and to play around with some like quantum components. I mean, I think it's a little bit more of a complex class because the primary ability is to sort of create materials and items that the group might need and create NPCs that live nearby. And that can be, quite challenging for some groups and some players, but again, I think it totally is awesome and totally worth it. So let's take a look at a couple of the heroic skills. We're not going to go into the details of this, but remember how I said that when you make delicacies with the Gourmet, they have to combine 2 ingredients, right? Like you can include a bitter and a sweet. Maybe like a dark chocolate cookie, right? A super, super dark chocolate cookie. And it's bitter and sweet. Well, all you can eat is a heroic skill. And if you take the heroic skill, you can combine 4 ingredients into a delicacy. And you could create like the ultimate smorgasbord. Some of these other ones, Aura Master's Refraction improves the aura and barrier spells. So that's from the core book. Brambleheart is for the Dark Blade or the Floralist. Brambles protect you and react to enemy attacks. Oh, they can combine 2 or 3. I thought they could only combine 2. Okay, Z, thank you. For a better future, you can use trade points instead of Fabula points, and you can improve settlements with donations. So you can become like a philanthropist. Greater Chloromancy lets you increase the effects of your Magiseed. Green Thumb can let you quicken or delay the growth of your Magiseed. Remember how before it was just like it ticks up by 1 every round? Well, with Green Thumb, you can make it slow down or you can make it speed up. This Power Nap available to the Guardian, the Merchant, and the Wayfarer. Take a little nap during a conflict to regain your energies. It's like Snorlax. So heroic skills, I mean, it's just another level by which you can customize your character. Because in Fabula Ultima, by the end of the game, assuming you go to level 50, your character can, I think, have up to like 6 or 7 classes. Is that right? 10, 10, 10 would be 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, you could have up to 7 classes by the end of the game. You could have 4 classes that are maxed out at heroic, so 10, 10, 10, 10. And then you could have 3 classes that are, 3, 3, 4, equaling 10. And then you're at 50. So in addition to all that, when you take a class, unlike in D&D, you could be a Darkblade, I could be a Darkblade, and we could take totally different skills. You could be an Invoker, I could be an Invoker. You could be a Floralist, and I could be a Floralist. And we take totally different skills. We have totally different Magiseeds. So we're already completely different, even though we have the same thing. But that's before we even consider all our other classes. Oh, you're a Floralist? Okay, well, you're a Floralist Darkblade. I'm a Floralist Elementalist. And that's before we take our other classes. But then when we do max out a class, we get to take these heroic skills. And as a result, that's just another level of customization that we can apply to this, which is crazy. Oh, you were right. Yes. Once per scene, when using cooking skill, you could combine 4 ingredients into a delicacy, ignoring the limit of 3 ingredients. So the normal limit is 3. Very, very cool. And by the way, this is that inner wellspring that chat was mentioning. You must have mastered the Invoker class when you acquire this heroic skill, and whenever you rest, you may choose one wellspring: air, earth, fire, lightning, or water. If you do, you gain the following benefits. You always treat the chosen wellspring as being available in the scene, in addition to whatever wellsprings are already available. You may perform rituals of the elementalism discipline, but only if those rituals manipulate the element of the chosen wellspring. You gain resistance to the damage corresponding to the chosen wellspring. Resistance means half damage, like 5e, like that. Resistance is half damage. Immunity is 0 damage. Absorb is it heals you. And vulnerable means you take double damage. And when you deal damage, you may change its type to the one corresponding to the chosen wellspring. And if you do that, the damage ignores any resistances. So once you have, basically, it's called inner wellspring, right? Because before, your Invoker, your Geomancer, was relying on the energy outside. But now you can harness the elemental energy within. The fiery, flaming soul of your character. That's the fire wellspring. And you could draw upon that. And not just draw upon that, but really draw upon that. Because now you're resistant to fire. Your damage deals fire. You ignore fire resistance. You push through it. You can control fire through elementalism and do cool fire effects as sort of that soft magic system. That's pretty cool. That's a fun one. I would probably pick that one up if I was a Invoker. All right. Lastly, what would Fabula... So for those of you who don't know, Fabula Ultima consists of 2 types of metacurrency. Fabula points, which are owned by the PCs and are used to invoke your bonds and call upon your identities. And Ultima points. And Ultima points are the villain points. The villains use in order to, I'll get you next time gadget, to get away, or to evolve and this is not even my final form, and actually upgrade themselves as they take even greater risks, and they even push themselves further. So, as good as important as it is, so is a good villain. So here are some antagonists for natural fantasy. And again, they are talking about, some of the tropes and the concepts and the principles of building a good villain, especially in a natural fantasy concept. So a lot of this is just information, basic archetypes, the arrogant, the protector, the outsider, the catastrophe, right? And, I love the idea of, again, I like, morally ambiguous things. I love the idea of a villain who's actually just trying to save something, but is willing to compromise and is willing to disrupt that natural balance in order to achieve that end. And it's this idea of, do the ends justify the means? And maybe for this villain, they do, but that's what makes them a villain, right? So stuff about all about villains and all this other stuff. So we've got a couple different villains here. We've got and then they go ahead and give us some examples. Okay. So we've got Tonetriana Rex, which is like a giant bug beetle thing composed of different parts, of course. It's a multi-part boss, right? There's the abdomen, there's the head, there's the thorax, right? You have to fight the different parts of the body. But I believe, and let me double check this here. Check my Discord. The author recommended that I show Titania and the section on multi-part bosses. So I'm going to shoot ahead to Titania. So here is Titania, the Queen of Fairies. So here's Titania, the Queen of Fairies. Just awesome art. And she is a major villain, which means she has 10 Ultima points available to her. And she is a atypical antagonist who might assume one of two symmetrical forms, the Queen of Midday or the Queen of Midnight, alongside their corresponding mischievous court. If the characters challenge Titania, the Fey Monarch enters the fray as the Queen of Midday, accompanied by 2 sun poppies. When reduced to 0 hit points in either form, Titania uses the Dawn or Dusk special rule to assume the opposite form. After each shift, Titania is considered a new creature in terms of the rules, with full hit points, full mind points, no lingering status effects, any and all spells that affected the other form end, and any symbol from high fantasy class called the Symbologist is removed. It's possible to steal from them twice using Soul Steal once per form. So it's basically like 2 monsters. From the perspective of Titania and her court, our heroes are a form of entertainment, so a sacrifice is not available in this conflict. So in Fabula Ultima, if your character goes to 0 hit points against a villain, you can choose to, anytime your character goes to 0 hit points, you can choose to surrender. Your character basically doesn't die, but, gives up something, or something changes, or there's a setback in something. But against a villain, a character could choose also, when reduced to 0 hit points, to sacrifice, which means your character does die, but you do some heroic deed, sometimes, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, but at the cost of your character's life. But this boss removes the sacrifice rule. So you can't choose sacrifice. If you get beaten by her, the only option you have is to surrender. But it is possible to perform some deeds to gain the favor of the court. The amount of favor gained is shown in the brackets in the list below. The game master has to reveal this information as soon as someone fulfills a deed, but the full list must be kept secret. All right, I guess I'm spoiling a little bit here. Each deed provides favor only once. Okay. Okay, here we go. So when you're beating, look at this. Okay, so check this out. If I'm reading this right. When you start fighting her, she's in her daytime form. When she goes to 0 hit points, she assumes her nighttime form. When you kill her nighttime form, she goes back to her daytime form. She just keeps going back and forth. You can't beat her through hit point damage alone. But if she takes you out, you can't sacrifice to try to take her out with a sacrifice. Instead, you have to do these things throughout the course of the fight. Now, this list is supposed to be secret. All right. If the group accomplishes a combo breaker and you set up a situation where Titania cannot perform any action during their turn because she's just so tapped out, the group earns +1 deed. If a player, yes, a player, not a character, makes Titania laugh, then you've broken the fourth wall and you get a +1 deed. Inconceivable! If a PC wins an opposed check where Titania is using her bonus of her aspect, you earn +1 deed. So there's all these different ways to earn bonuses. If the PCs accumulate 6 or more favor, Titania loses all their Ultima points and the conflict ends. The queen is now willing to negotiate with the group. Okay, so we have this alternate win condition of achieving, deeds. In fact, 1 deed you can see here, you get 2 deed points if she's reached 0 hit points once in each form. 100 to 0. A PC reduces an opponent from max HP to 0 hit points. You earn the 100 to 0. All right, so here she is. She's a level 30 elemental. So not quite full end game, but she's up there. And she is a champion 3, which basically means she is taking the space of 3 monsters. Normal Fabula Ultima math is that you basically have 1 monster for each PC, kind of like 4th edition. So she's almost a full solo. Not quite, but almost. And I think she has some like little underling minions with her. So again, Fabula Ultima stat blocks. She has these traits. These traits don't mean anything. They are just a way to sort of understand how to play the character, how to describe her, how to quickly decide what her attacks look like or what her effects look like. And you can use them also, too, to determine how Ultima points or Fabula points interact with her. She has Dex of D8, Insight of D10, Might D10. She has 300 hit points, 160 magic points, or mind points, sorry. Her initiative value is 12. Not that that matters anymore, because unofficially, we don't use initiative anymore. She has resistance to physical damage. So she takes half damage from all physical, basically weapon damage. She's immune to air damage. She is vulnerable to dark. She is vulnerable to earth. She is immune to fire. She is vulnerable to cold. She is healed by light energy, and she is immune to poison. This is her in her midday form. She has a basic attack that targets somebody, does air damage, and they are slowed. Slow is one of the status effects in Fabula Ultima. She has a spell. It's called Solar Mantle. It is an instant damage spell. It targets up to 3 creatures, costs some mana points, and it deals light damage, not like light, not heavy, but like sunlight, light damage to each target. She also has some other actions. She has her Fairy Decree. Now, keep in mind, as a champion 3, she will get to take 3 actions per round. She has the Fairy Decree. Titania may use an action to impose one of the following decrees, which ends the effect of any prior decree. After that, they can perform a free attack with their Royal Fan against a random target. By the way, I like that the Royal Fan deals air damage. She's blowing. She's got like her kind of Oriental fan, or Japanese fan or whatever. So she can declare the season of opposites. When an enemy performs a check, but not an open check or an opposed check, they succeed if they roll lower than the difficulty level instead of equal or higher. So basically, she can turn the math of the game around. She can declare the mirror. Remember, these are her fairy decrees, right? She's a fairy. She's fae. It's this weird, twisted mirror world shit. All right, mirror. When an enemy has to choose one or more targets for an effect, they have to do so randomly. Hey, I'm going to heal my party member. Oh, it's going to be a random party member instead. Law of the Fairies. When an enemy performs an opposed check, the queen chooses which attributes they use. Spoiler alert, she'll probably choose the ones that you're worst at. So that's her decree. And once she sets a decree, that decree is in effect until she declares a new decree. But that does take her action for that turn. But remember, she gets 3 turns per round. She can also do her Radiant Bloom. She can spend her action and 20 MP to make all of the sun poppies, those are her middle minions, bloom. If there is no sun poppy present on the scene, a new one enters the conflict and immediately blooms. So this is her leader ability, make all my minions do something. If I don't have any minions, summon more minions. Special rules. She gets +3 to all opposed checks involving fairies or diplomacy. She, as an elemental, is immune to poison. She has a weird mind, and at the start of each of her turns, if she's dazed or shaken, she can recover from these effects and regain 10 MP. And lastly, Dusk. When Titania is reduced to 0 hit points in the Queen of Midday form, they have to spend 1 Ultima point to call forth the night. So yes, you could also kill her 10 times, or she doesn't spend any other Ultima points, because she only has 10 Ultima points. So if she does so, Titania and any remaining sun poppies leave the conflict, and at the end of the current round, she returns to the conflict as the Queen of Midnight. If she has no Ultima points left, she surrenders. So she cannot swap indefinitely. If she uses up all of her Ultima points and you dusk and dawn her enough times that she loses her Ultima points, she will eventually be forced to surrender. So that is her in her Queen of Midday. But she also, and this is the Sun Poppy. She has 2 of these by default. So this is just a level 30 default creature. So hardly weak, but still. It has 100 hit points, has some of the same resistances and vulnerabilities. It has this Diurnal Caress, which deals some light damage. And the next time they suffer light damage, they suffer 5 extra damage. So it sort of sets up a combo of light damage stacking on itself. Sweet Oblivion. They can use their action to drain enemies of strength. Each enemy the Sun Poppy can see loses 20 mind points. Obviously, this is because they're a poppy, right? They're sleep. They're drawing away your will because they're poppies, aka opiates. This is, by the way, brutal. Holy shit, that is brutal. That's like a massive MP drain on the whole party. I mean, she starts with 2 of these things. Each one can just pop Sweet Oblivion and just drain 40 MP a round from the party. That's a lot of MP to drain. The party's probably going to want to burn these things down really quick. But they also are immune to being poisoned because they're an elemental. If it's reduced to 0 hit points, okay, here we go. But if you kill it, all enemies present on the scene regain 30 MP. So it's one of those things where it's like they can drain a bunch of MP from you, but then when you kill them, you get some of it back. So it's almost like one of those things where you can kind of kill them strategically to try to manage your MP better. As long as she is in bloom and Titania is not in crisis, the Sun Poppy loses their vulnerabilities to ice and dark damage and Withering Heap. After the Sun Poppy loses hit points due to a damage of a type she is vulnerable to, or if she loses any amount of MP, if she is in bloom, she stops being in bloom. Here are her tactics. You're like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Keep in mind, this is like a major villain. That's literally her title, right? Major villain. But here are her tactics. On the first round, she'll use Fairy Decree to impose one of their decrees in cyclical order. Season of Opposites, Mirror Mirror, Law of the Fairies, then Season of Opposites, again, and so on. On the second enemy turn, if they have enough MP, Titania uses Radiant Bloom. Otherwise, they attack a random target with Royal Fan. Next, all Sun Poppies perform their turns. Their first, if present, uses Sweet Oblivion. The second uses Diurnal Caress. On the final enemy turn, they use Solar Mantle on as many enemies as possible. If they have less than 10 MP, they spend an Ultima point to recover instead. So, there you go. Now you know how to run this boss. But she can also transform into the Queen of Midnight. And here we can see that she's similar, but now she's vulnerable to air. She's vulnerable to light. She absorbs dark damage. So now you got to like completely switch the script from an elemental damage standpoint. By the way, note both forms are resistant to physical damage. She deals ice damage with her fairy arrow. She deals dark damage with her lunar blanket. She can make her moon orchids bloom. And she can declare a hunt instead of a decree. She can hound the prey, which let her and her orchids deal extra damage against targets that are weak. She can choose a moon orchid who performs his turn immediately. And the next time a source deals damage to Titania or one or more moon orchid, that source deals no damage instead. She has some special rules, which is that when she's reduced to 0, she comes back. And at the start of each of her turns, if she is slow or weak, she recovers from all of that and recovers 10 MP. Here's a moon orchid. What they do, they, again, do dark damage that can deal extra damage if they're in bloom. They can also do AoE to deal 10 damage to every enemy they can see. As long as they're in bloom, they become vulnerable to physical damage. But if they lose hit points due to a type they're vulnerable to, they stop being in bloom. And then here are the Queen of Midnight's tactics, and continue to go through that pattern. So there's absolutely an opportunity with these tactics for the monsters or for the players to learn the pattern of these bosses. But make no mistake, like in order to be able to beat these creatures in any sort of reasonable fashion, you have to have a way to be versatile, to be able to recover from statuses and effects, to be able to attack and hit multiple types of damage types. But this isn't like D20. This isn't like D&D. Like, it's very common for PCs to have the ability to do flaming damage and to do poison damage. But if you're just a one-trick pony, you're going to find yourself kind of shit out of luck against this very complicated creature. So that is just an example of one villain. And that is what I would love to maybe talk to Emmanuel about, is how do you create these really cool ultimate villains? And by the way, there's multiple ones of these. Here's a level 40 creature. This is like the great forest spirit, Eldrin. And Eldrin, another amazing piece of art, by the way. Look at that. That thing's sweet. Eldrin is a multi-phase where it starts off with you doing like trials and like fighting against the actual like will of the forest. And then it's a level 40 plant creature that you fight. Then in phase 2, you fight the Ancient, which is a champion 5. So this is like a full-on solo, takes 5 actions a turn, level 40 plant, 700 hit points. And then phase 3, you fight the Heart, a champion 4, level 40 plant, the living core, as you fight your way to the center of this massive colossal beast. Pretty sure this thing is like a Shadow of the Colossus type thing. So like the first part is you work your way into the center. Then you fight your way. You fight your way past the Ancient character, and then eventually you make your way into the pulsing heart of the forest. Yeah. So did that heart absorb everything? Yes. Nice call, Z. You know what? I'm not even going to look up what the deal is with this creature, but yes, as written, this creature absorbs, which means doesn't take damage from, heals from every damage type. So talk about a fight where you just can't swing your sword, right? Yeah. Nasty stuff, folks. Nasty stuff. So again, there's that's the last villain in the book. Then we got our index. Again, inspirational work, some credits, shout outs to everybody. And your story will bring new kindness. Our final sign off. And then, of course, the lovely Pixel Quill that is the sign off to a Fabula Ultima book. So there you go. This is available. You can get it from DriveThruRPG. We have a link in the description below to our affiliate link if you want to send us a buck or two. It doesn't cost you any extra money. So the big news is that, of course, obviously, if this is getting ready for print, they've been working on this for the past year. So now they're not resting on their laurels. Emmanuel and their is working and crew are working on a bestiary. And I'm very excited for that. I think that's the book I want more than anything. I'd love to have a beautiful big bestiary with like 200 plus monsters. Just like, and lots of quick assemblers and stuff like this. This is a great book. There's a lot of stuff in here. Don't get me wrong. I liked techno fantasy. I liked high fantasy. I liked Zero Powers. I thought those were cool. Technospheres is what we're using in our book. But I think the books have gotten better. High fantasy was good. Techno fantasy was better than good. I think natural fantasy is probably my favorite one to date. I think the classes show an elegance and a design, complexity that is appropriate for this stage in the game, or in the development of this game. And so I'm a big fan of that. The Kickstarter is an insta buy for me. I'm going to need those alternate covers. Yeah, the Kickstarter looks amazing. Emmanuel's going to be going all out, and they don't do Kickstarters like all that often. So this is an opportunity for them to pull out all the stops and really do some really cool books. I don't usually go all in on Kickstarters, and I usually don't go all in on bestiaries. This is the type of thing that I'm going to get. And as an example of what I was talking about when I was talking about like my style, or like my appreciation for this. Obviously, you people know I'm an art person, but hold on one second. So I own these two art books, which are just Final Fantasy, sketches and graphic art and, like a character art from the original games all the way up through, I think, Final Fantasy 9, which obviously stops at 10 because 10 was the first Final Fantasy I didn't love. I thought 12 was okay. I never played 13, and I never played 14, and I never played 15, and I never played 16. So in many ways, Final Fantasy 9 was like my last Final Fantasy. But I love JRPGs. I love them. In fact, there's been a discussion. I mean, I'm super busy, and obviously there's a lot going on with my family situation right now. And I'm actually trying to get a Fabula Ultima campaign off the ground with my group. We did a session 0 twice to build characters and build a world with my friends to play on Fridays. But that hasn't launched yet because people have been busy, and I've been really busy. And obviously with stuff going on with my dad, there's been a lot of sudden changes in plans and a lot of planning and a lot of tough decisions. And I've been very busy with work and the channel and a new opportunity that I'm going to be working on, doing a little bit of consulting for somebody in some game design space. So there's a lot of stuff on my plate. So I really want to get my Fabula Ultima game going on. That being said, I don't like bestiaries, but I really want this bestiary. I love Final Fantasy monsters. I love that. I love dumb Final Fantasy monsters. Like, give me, give me a jelly and like a floating chef's hat. Like if it was D&D, I would say this is the dumbest monster ever. But if there was like, I don't know, like a floating fork and knife, monster, I would be like, this is excellent, especially if it has like a very punny name. So I'm really looking forward to the bestiary. Natural Fantasy is great. I love the classes in it. I think the Floralist and the Gore. If you want a complex, some of the classes in Fabula Ultima are very simple, and that's good. It's great. It's click and shoot. Click and point. You just does damage. Okay, attack, do damage. They're very basic. Some of them have a little bit more sophistication to it, and they need a little bit of nuance. Some of these classes are more complicated, but that's good because this is the fourth book, right? Like you have the core book, you had high fantasy, you had techno fantasy, and now you have natural fantasy. And there's no doubt about it. The gourmet, the floralist, the invoker, these are complicated classes that change and have variable effects, and it's not just as simple as point and click. And the merchant has a lot of like quantum elements and creating NPCs in the course of the game. So these are more complicated classes, but that's okay because we're doing that. So so if you haven't already, the last opportunity because we're about to do the drawing. If you type !join, you're going to join my giveaway to win a hardcover copy of the Atlas Techno Fantasy. And that is going to include a signature from Emmanuel, the author of the game. And yeah, so all I have to say is, if you win, you are a terrible person. This is my buddy that I play racquetball and go to. Now I'm like dreading this. I'm dreading Ron winning. So yeah, definitely hyped to do this for Fabula Ultima. I've got a couple other Fabula Ultima prizes as well. We reached our tip goal, so we're going to be doing another stream hopefully soon with Emmanuel. And when we do a Emmanuel stream, we'll be giving away. I have a couple more Fabula Ultima books that to give away that have been signed. I also have a copy of the Game Master's Kit signed by Emmanuel as well. That's the GM screen and some of the quick start rules. So I do have a bunch of options. So all right, so it's 10 o'clock. So yeah, so if you haven't seen it, hold on a second. So this is the GM kit. It has a pamphlet, which includes information about how to, it's got a bunch of random rolls to generate special abilities, allies, NPCs, new skills, random dangers, random magical items. It's only like 20 pages or 30 pages. No, it's 40 pages, but it's just chock full of just Oracle kits. And then this is the GM screen. This absolutely gorgeous art. And it's fantastically useful. I mean, it just has everything that you need to play the game. It's an awesome factor format. It's awesome. It's just a very nice book is how I would describe it. And yeah, we got some to give away. All right, well, we got 47 entries. Here we go. Hopefully I don't screw this up. All right, drum roll. We don't really have a drum roll, so. All right, it's my first time using this, so hopefully this doesn't work here. All right, I'm going to stop entries. So this is your last chance. Last chance! Exclamation point join. Exclamation point join. All right, I'm stopping the entries in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, entries have been stopped. All right. Maybe. All right, our winner is Pathfinder PhD. That is our winner. Congratulations, Pathfinder PhD. Wait. What's this? Boom, Nathaniel Wise. You also get a copy of Fabula Ultima Techno Fantasy. Also signed by Emmanuel Galetto. Oh, okay. What's this? Wait a second. Is this a third signed copy of Atlas Techno Fantasy? Do we need a third winner? I think we do. Tabletop nerd Josh. All right. That is our 3 winners. All right. Congrats to Nathaniel, Josh, and I already forgot who the other person was. To Pathfinder PhD. All right. So for members of my Patreon, some of which some of my winners are, just PM me on the Patreon. If Nathaniel, I don't know if you're a member of our Patreon or not, but if you're not, send me an email at dmelinda@nightslastcall.com. And if you could just send me a link to your like YouTube account so I can just verify that it's you. I'll get that all set up to you, and we'll get your information. We'll get that shipped out to you guys. So there we go. We've got 3 signed copies of Fabula Ultima Techno Fantasy Atlas coming out. Remember, this is it also includes a PDF redemption code, and we'll be mailing these out this month to our winners. So congrats. And again, thank you to everybody for hanging out. Thank you for the awesome tip goals. And depending on where these things are going to, all that money will basically go into into shipping. But that's the price. That's the price I pay for running my channel the way that I run my channel. So again, congrats to Josh, Nathaniel, and Pathfinder PhD. Get in touch with me if you're a winner. If you're a member of the Patreon, just message me or ping me on the Discord. Otherwise, you can email me dmelinda@nightslastcall.com, and we'll get that all set up. We're going to get Emmanuel on here. I'm sure I can twist his arm and get him on here, and then we'll do some giveaways of the GM kit when Emmanuel is on. So look forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun. And again, I'm excited about this game. I think this game has a lot of promise and potential. It's quick, it's fast, it's easy, and it's intuitive. It encourages a certain amount of mechanical, crunchy play, where you can really build characters and build teams, and you don't have to think, but it doesn't have the grind of the grid. It's much more loose in fashion, ultimately, I think it plays out really well. But outside of conflicts, it has an incredibly robust system for supporting emergent play, low prep, no prep play, collaboration with your players, a meta currency system that I just adore, both on the player side and the GM side. There's so much I like about this system. I can't wait to get this campaign off and running with my group of friends, and I think it's just fantastic, So, yeah. Rod says I should do another one. No, I'm not doing another one. Three is all I got, unless I give away my copy. But yeah, it's a gorgeous set of books. I'm so stoked for it. I'm stoked for the upcoming Kickstarter. I'm stoked for the premium options that are going to be there. Some hardback books. I think that'll be beautiful. I love softback books, but hardback books are nice. I'm excited for the bestiary. I just think it's going to be a great game. And again, it's the publisher has delivered. The quality has not dropped. If anything, the quality has gone up. For an independent publisher to release a book of this quality every single year since the game has come out is just incredible. And now, after 3+ years, we're getting a premium bestiary. We're getting our print copy of Natural Fantasy, probably Gen Con this year is what I would imagine. And then then next year, and then probably the end of the year, we'll start to see some early play testing of the bestiary, and then we'll get that product bestiary in 2026. So very excited, happy to be playing the game. It's got a big group of following on Night's Last Call Discord. We've had several groups running games for a while now. Some campaigns have wrapped up. Maybe some more will start up soon. Who knows? But either way, I'm excited to share the journey with you all. So Z says we're already seeing some play testing of bestiary stuff. So yeah, I'm hyped for the bestiary too, and that's a lot coming from me. That being said, Fabula Ultima, it's not perfect. There's things that changes that when we played the first time, when we were playing some demo games, we were very quickly like, we don't want to do this. And some of those changes, I don't know if my grumbling about them influenced the decision, but Emmanuel has sort of said, yeah, like initiative, it's better if we don't roll it. It's better if we just go, PCs go, monsters go, unless it's a villain, in which case the villain goes. And I was like, yeah, I didn't want to roll initiative. I hate initiative rolling. This is way cooler. And I love that system. And that's kind of what we were doing. And even in my upcoming game, I'm planning on implementing a house rule on top of those rules, which is I don't like straight up re-rolls, especially when you can keep re-rolling and re-rolling and re-rolling. So in my game, when you invoke your identity or origin or theme, instead of re-rolling one or both of your dice that you rolled, you could just set one of them to its highest value. So if you roll a D10 and a D8 and you roll a 2 on the 8, and a 7 on the D10, you could turn the 7 into a 10, or you could turn the 2 into an 8 for the cost of 1 Fabula point. If you invoke your identity, your origin, or your theme and make it make sense. And if somebody wants to spend 2 Fabula points, they can turn both dice to max, which also will trigger a crit. Even though they're not the same value, in one of my house rules that I even did the first time I played Fabula Ultima. Well, I didn't even do it. It wasn't really a house rule. I just thought it was the rule, is that if you roll max on both dice, it's a crit. So if you roll a D10 and a D8 and you roll a 10 and an 8, that's a crit in my game. Basically 2 Fabula points gives you the highest possible roll and a crit. And I still like that system because it avoids having to do rerolls, which are just awkward, especially in this game because you can keep doing them over and over and over again. Lollipop says, how does that affect the feeling of invoking bonds? I'm hoping, Lollipop, that it causes them to, number 1, be invoked less often, which actually I want. I prefer, I should say. The second is, and I think this is what I really, really like, is that a Fabula point spent on raising the die roll can never actually get you better than what you could just roll otherwise. So, if I'm rolling a D8 and a D10, the highest I can roll is 18. And if I use 2 Fabula points, I will get an 18. That's the highest I can roll. Doesn't matter how many, I can get 18. Bonds let me go beyond 18. Does that make sense? I think that's where I'm at. Oh, you auto succeed on a crit. Oh, I didn't know that. All right, well then maybe I do have to change that. I'll figure out something. But I just don't like re-rolling is what it really comes down to. I need to get rid of the re-roll option. But I didn't know you auto succeed on a crit. So that's good to know. Maybe I'll get rid of auto succeeding on a crit. But homebrew thread, yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. I mean, obviously I've only played Fabula Ultima like 2 or 3 times, so I don't want to presume. But I mean, there's just certain things that from playing it just once or twice, like if I play something once or twice and Smith plays something once or twice, usually the two of us can suss out where we see, flies in the ointment. And that was one of them. It was just like, I invoke my hometown, for my people. And I re-roll and you roll, worse or bad. And you're like, but also I hate my theme of hate and revenge. And I re-roll and you're like, oh, this is still garbage. I just don't like that. To me feels like, what are we even doing here moment? I'm just like, it's kind of like taking 20. At a certain point, I just want to be like, yes, okay, fine. You spend 2 Fabula points, you get the highest you can get, Maybe I'll just change that crit rule because that way we don't have that problem, Yeah, so that's just a personal problem I have with that system, but maybe I'll come up with something different. Also, if I'm being honest with you, I kind of want, if it was up to me, and I don't know if I want to do the lifting on this, I don't like that, bonds and identity, origin, fate. I mean, yeah, sure. Identity, they let you re-roll. Bonds let you add a bonus. But it's all doing the same thing, right? Which is just giving you a bigger number. I kind of don't like, I kind of don't like that bonds are just bigger number. It's simple. It's easy. But I would like almost for those things to do different things. I don't know what they would be. I would almost appreciate it more if they did something different, is what I'm getting at. The numbers must burr. I mean, the numbers definitely burr in this game. You saw that one character had 900 hit points, or that one boss had 900 hit points. Yeah, exactly. During our game, I literally saw, because I was very egregious with, villain cutscenes and stuff. And, somebody had 4 or 5 Fabula points and they spent 3 or 4 of them just re-rolling and just kept rolling like shit and just re-rolling and re-rolling and re-rolling. And it was just, it just, it was very, and it turned what should have been a really awesome moment into kind of a comedy of errors. And I just didn't like that. And I was like, oh, can we tech our way around this? So maybe we will do a Fabula Ultima thread or a forum post. We can talk about this stuff, especially people like Paul Finsteer, so people who have played Lollipop, people who have played a shitload of this game. So, okay, well, that's gonna do it for me. Just an FYI, Thursday is supposed to be. We're gonna have Tundalus back on the show, a patron who wrote Trespasser. We had him on before. We're gonna keep talking about Trespasser. We're gonna cover about a quarter of the game, maybe a third of the game. Vin's going to join too because he has some hot opinions about this game, and he's in the United States. But in the coming days or weeks, my availability may suddenly disappear, depending on what happens with my dad. Again, he's not expected to recover, and so and we're making appropriate plans and doing everything that we can do to prepare for that. But depending on what happens, there may be a period of time where I am not available on the stream or the Discord, just because I have to take care of family business and deal with my own, grief and things of that nature. So just appreciate, your patience and your understanding as we, go through this thing that we all go through at some point in our lives. And, anyways, thank you for that. And I appreciate the condolences and the well wishes and the soft thoughts. But, right now, he's comfortable. They're focusing on his care or his comfort. And that makes me feel a little bit better. Can't really stop him from dying, but we can try to make him as comfortable as he can when he kind of gets there. So, cherish your loved ones, folks. Just like RPGs are great. It's like Smith said, I don't even remember how many years ago. It was a very sobering moment when he said, I made the realization that I probably don't really have that many campaigns left in my life, at least not with all my friends. And it was like, yeah, wow. Like, this idea that maybe at some point in your life, you're going to be sitting down and the number of games or number of systems or the number of campaigns that you're going to play it could be counted on both hands, or maybe one hand, or maybe the last one. And it could be tomorrow. It could be, 40, 50 years from now. So make every day count. Natural fantasy would encourage us to embrace that cycle of life and death. And maybe that's one of the reasons why some of those themes hit me particularly hard. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the care and consideration that Emmanuel goes into writing his games. It's not just here's a blah, vomit of mechanics and here's a vomit of lore and philosophy. It's a nice little crunchy bit of both, little soft interior, little crunchy exterior, and it goes down real nice. So thank you to everybody who tipped. We had some nice people coming out today, showing some support for the show. Someone showing some support for Fabula Ultima in a big way. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Keegan. Thank you, Dr. Metropolis. Big shout out to Sunhawk and Lollipop Candy for their large tips. But thank you to everybody who kind of came out and supported today. And congrats to the winners. Happy to see that at least we got a couple patrons in there. And again, contact me if you're not, and we'll be in touch and we'll go from there. Otherwise, we'll be back Thursday, hopefully, fingers crossed, with Tundalus and Vin. And until then, stay safe, be good, take care of each other, and we'll get through this together. So see you next time on Knights of Last Call.